Chapter 1835. Perhaps it was because they didn't expect Mr. Luo to be so strong, the repair of the weapon shop was surprisingly fast. It took an afternoon. Although it wasn't repaired to the point where it could operate normally, it was enough to shelter the wind and rain. Ji Lian was counting the losses of this unexpected disaster with heartache, and he would cry from time to time. Boss Luo was tidying up the shelves while Araya brought a bucket of water and wiped it with a rag under Boss Luo's guidance. Although Ji Lian felt bad about it and even offered to pay some wages, if he really needed to pay, he probably wouldn't be able to pay the former administrator of this world and the original body of one of the two goddesses of creation, A0361 Laya. These are all made by Mr. Max himself, right? Luochu picked up a pair of wrist guards and looked at them carefully. Yes, most of the weapons in the shop were made by Pops, but there are some that were consigned for sale by others. Ji Lian looked up and said, "Sometimes we will buy some damaged weapons and armor and sell them after they are repaired. In fact, the weapon shops in the kingdom are more or less like this. But if you want to operate a weapon shop, you must have the qualifications of a certified kingdom craftsman. Ordinary merchants, even if they have money, can't get the permission of the kingdom's government." Boss Luo handed the wrist guards to Ji Lian and said casually, "Do you want to become a qualified craftsman?" Ji Lian shook his head and said, "I thought about it before, but Pop said I have no talent. I think it's true. To be honest, I don't have much interest in this." "Then what do you want to do?" At this time, Ji Lian picked up a short sword and a round shield from the shelf. She made a pose and said, "If possible, I hope to travel the continent and become an outstanding adventurer." Sure enough, becoming an adventurer really makes people look forward to it. He seemed to have fallen into a state of self-intoxication. He held the short sword and began to wave it around. It was like he was waving an iron hammer. But at this moment, Ji Lian's legs suddenly left the ground. He was directly grabbed by the collar from behind and lifted up. It was a tall man wearing a silver mask with only one eye exposed. Suddenly being mentioned, Ji Lian couldn't help but panic. But when he saw the person clearly, he immediately showed a surprised expression. "Wow, Uncle Zayart! When did you come back?" The masked man, the man known as Uncle Zayart, laughed heartily and put Ji Lian down. "I just came back not long ago. I passed by this place and came in to take a look. I didn't expect this weapon shop to collapse. When I left last time, I said that this place should be repaired. These two are? They are my friends." Ji Lian tidied his clothes at this moment. "They helped me before and now they helped me clean up the weapon shop. They are great people." "Really?" Uncle Zayart nodded and glanced at Boss Luo and Alaya in white inadvertently. "Ji Lian, I just came back and still have some goods to sort out. I won't stay any longer. I'll come to see you when I have time." "Leaving so soon?" Ji Lian couldn't hide the disappointment on his face. Zayart smiled and casually threw a box. "This is a little thing I received on the way. I'll give it to you. Take good care of it. I heard it can bring good luck. Also, there are a lot of strangers in the king's city recently. Don't run around at night. Max can't take care of you for long." After saying this, Uncle Zayart turned and left. Uncle Zayart is usually like this. He comes and goes quickly, but he is a good person. Ji Lian looked at Boss Luo and said, "Don't be offended." Boss Luo lightly shook his head. Ji Lian couldn't wait to open the little thing that Zayart gave him. What is this, necklace?" It was a necklace made of normal silver, but the pendant was a bit different. Boss Luo suddenly said, "Ji Lian, can I see this pendant?" "Of course." He didn't think and handed the necklace to Boss Luo. "What's so special about this pendant? But why does it look like a stone? And why is the shape so strange? What is engraved on it? Words?" "It's quite special." Boss Luo quickly returned the necklace to Ji Lian, smiled and said, "Take good care of it. Maybe it can bring you good luck like what Mr. Zayart said." Ji Lian shrugged and didn't care, but he directly put on the necklace, and casually hung it around his neck. By the way, can you tell me more about this Mr. Zayart? Jillian nodded and said, Uncle Zayart is a traveling merchant. He often travels around the world. I can only see him once in a while. But he has been around since I can remember. He seems to have known my father since he was young. They like to quarrel when they meet, but they seem to have a good relationship. Every time Uncle Zayart comes back, he will bring me some fun things and tell me some of his experiences on the road. Let me tell you something. Once, Uncle Zayart told me that he was searching for. His eyebrows danced as he spoke, as if he had personally experienced those amazing adventures. Perhaps the reason he wanted to become an adventurer was because of Uncle Zayart's experience. When it was almost dark, Mr. Max held his forehead with a painful expression and walked out with a smell of alcohol. There was even some anxiety and fear on his face. Dad? Jillian quickly walked up to support him. What's wrong with you? Drinking again? That guy. Where is Zayart? Where did he go? Uncle Max asked in a deep voice. Gone. Gone. How long has he been gone? He quickly grasped Jillian's arm and asked anxiously. Quite a while? Jillian thought for a while and said, Almost an hour. Why, what's the matter? Hey, Dad, aren't you maintaining Mr. Luo's weapon? How did he run? Jillian suddenly stopped talking, then looked back at Boss Luo, smiled embarrassedly, and pulled Uncle Max a few steps away, then lowered his voice and said, You went drinking again. I'm obviously doing something serious. What if the guests find out about this? Dad, if you continue to be like this, we can only drink the northwest wind. Uncle Max was silent, then pushed Jillian away a little, then walked to Boss Luo, thought for a while and said, Your weapon is a bit special. It will be difficult to completely maintain it in a short period of time. You can come back in 3 days to get it. Jillian was startled. He knew that although his dad was not very good, he always maintained weapons and armor very quickly. 3 days, this was something that had never happened before. I know, this sword should be very special. Boss Luo smiled and said, It's okay, I will come back in 3 days. I think Mr. Max will definitely help me maintain it. Well, fortunately, Mr. Luo was magnanimous. Jillian nodded secretly, if he could get a few more customers like him. Of course. Max nodded and said seriously, I swear in the name of my weapon shop and my ancestors, I will definitely return it to you intact. Boss Luo smiled slightly. I think it's getting late, I won't disturb you. Then, I will take my leave. Mr. Luo, I will send you off. Jillian said quickly. Boss Luo waved his hand, indicating that there was no need. Jillian had to say, Have you found a place to stay? It seems that all the major hotels in the capital are crowded now. What do you think? I have a place to stay. Boss Luo said casually. I was lucky to find a hotel with rooms, called Forest Cabin. Jillian finally sent him off, out of the door. Boss Luo walked up at this time, looked at Jillian, and suddenly put the stone pendant hanging in front of his chest into his clothes, smiled and said, It will be easy to lose it if it is exposed. After all, it is a gift from someone, you have to cherish it. Oh. Jillian stared at Boss Luo in a daze. She couldn't help blushing and her ears turning red. I see. He watched Boss Luo and White Araya disappear into the crowd, and then reluctantly withdrew his gaze. But when he returned to the weapon shop, he didn't see Old Man Max. Jillian searched inside and out, but still couldn't find Old Man Max. He couldn't help but frown. Mr. Luo's weapon also seems to be missing. Did Old Man Max take it? Right at this moment, someone knocked on the tattered door of the weapon shop that had just been put back. A short-haired, beautiful, and capable woman walked in. Sorry, we are not open today. Jillian had to come forward and said. The weapon shop indeed couldn't do business at this time. The short-haired woman muttered, Strange. I clearly sensed this place. Why did it suddenly disappear? Miss? Jillian opened his mouth. Not doing business. Nothing. The short-haired woman shook her head and said, This little guy is quite handsome. Ha ha ha, goodbye. Bang! The door was closed. Jillian was stunned and subconsciously scratched his head, muttering, "Weird guy." Dr. Gores thought that no matter what, they should try the most direct method, to sneak into the palace and find out the truth. "Don't worry, we followed Mr. Varley and broke into the palace so many times, so we already know the layout of the palace." Dr. Gores reassured Tina and Sneeve at this time. "Besides, there is a secret passage leading to the inside." "Ha, I found it, it's still here." Somewhere outside the palace wall, in a small jungle in a deserted corner, Dr. Gores easily moved a big stone away. A huge iron plate was exposed under the soil. After pulling the ring and opening the iron plate, an old smell suddenly drifted out. Dr. Gores pinched his nose and jumped down directly. When Tina and Sneeve also jumped down one after another, Dr. Gores had already lit a torch to illuminate the road ahead. "I think that summoning the kingdom's guardian requires the bloodline of the kingdom, but it doesn't necessarily need the princess," Dr. Gores said quickly. "Actually, the king is more perfect, isn't it? The princess already has powerful guards, not to mention the king." "Doctor?" The servant girl was quite suspicious. "Where there is a will, there is a way." Dr. Girls smiled and said, "No matter who our target is, there will always be one side that will slack off. There is a saying in the East that is called, 'You speak loudly in the East, but the real attack is in the West.'" At this time, Mr. Sneeve suddenly dodged to the side. In a split second, Tina and Dr. Gores also reacted very quickly and moved together. At the same time, there was a loud sound. A sharp long arrow directly flew past them and finally penetrated into the rock behind them. The root was buried in. This arrow was not only sharp, but also shockingly powerful. "You old bastard!" Dr. Gores fiercely stared at Sneeve at this time. He secretly hated that this old bastard didn't warn him and just ran away first. "It's coming," Sneeve said in a low voice and then fanned again. Dr. Gores didn't have time to scold him at this time. At this time, the sound of air breaking was heard again and again. In front of the secret passage, cold lights were shot, which was extremely frightening. In the end, the three of them couldn't completely avoid these cold arrows shot from the dark. In the end, they could only brace themselves and use their own skills. After a while, they finally cut down all the cold arrows that were shot from the dark. But at this time, their backs were cold and their arms were even numb because of the great power of the arrows. They were panting heavily. "It seems to have stopped." Tina looked ahead and activated the detection magic skill. "It seems that something is approaching." She couldn't help but clench the weapon in her hand and move her feet quietly. At this time, the three of them were focused on the secret passage in front of them, and they saw a figure slowly walking in front of them. It was not clear, but it seemed to be a man. When he walked, accompanied by the sound of metal clashing, he should be wearing armor. "The king is right. The invaders from the other world are finally waiting for you." The voice was low but clear at the same time. In this narrow secret passage, it was even louder. Finally, a middle-aged man with a long bow and a face full of scars, wearing a silver-gray armor and holding a long bow, appeared in front of Dr. Gores and the other three people. He slowly pulled the long bow in his hand and put another iron arrow on it. On the arrowhead, a whirlpool-like silver light was circling rapidly. "Go!" Dr. Gores yelled. The silver arrow, a huge silver light beam, was shot out directly at this time. Bang! A bright light rushed to the sky from the small forest, accompanied by a huge cloud of dust. The entire small forest shook a little at this time. The middle-aged man with a long bow and a face full of scars slowly walked out and looked around. Did they escape? They escaped very quickly. He turned around and walked into the underground secret passage again. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. It had been a long time. Suddenly, the soil in the forest was turned over by something, and three figures climbed out awkwardly. Dr. Gores spat out the soil and rotten leaves in his mouth. His face was full of horror. What happened? Why is there an ambush in the secret passage? The guy with the arrow seemed to have mentioned the king? Tina frowned. The king of Anes, King Amos? Dr. Gores didn't say anything, and finally he gritted his teeth and said, "Let's get out of here first. That guy is too powerful. Look at the power of his attack. It's not much weaker than that of Malik." The three figures escaped into the downtown area of King's City awkwardly. Chapter 1836. It was really miserable. Dr. Gores thought so. The three of them were really miserable at this time. The reason was not only that they were almost killed in the ambush in the secret passage, but also that they had not been able to find a hotel to stay in so far. Not to mention a hotel, they didn't even have a house. Because of the unprecedented grand competition in King's City, even the idle rooms in ordinary houses were quite scarce at this time. Snake found an empty stable for a family, but the smell was so strong that anyone who smelled it would know. "I've decided to stay here. This place is not bad. It's airy, cool, and spacious. There's nothing more suitable than here. In the end, we really have to live under the bridge." The maid, Tina, pursed her lips tightly at this time, and her eyebrows were sour as if she had eaten a lemon. It was really miserable. "Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's talk about what happened in the secret passage," Dr. Gores said seriously. "Everyone knows that the last step for us to clear the game was to directly find the king of the kingdom. We promised that we wouldn't trouble him, and he would use a descendant to summon a guardian to send us away. Because there were many descendants of the king in the past, this kind of transaction has always been peaceful. But this time is different. It's not surprising that the current King Amos knows about our existence," Tina said indifferently. "The royal family has records about us, but it should only be known by the king. In the current situation, it can't be simpler. The current King Amos intends to tear up the agreement between the two sides, and even has the intention to eliminate us. It's the servants who came to the chessboard," Dr. Gores corrected. "It's not us. King Amos's target is obviously the servants, that is, the so-called foreign invaders." Tina smiled bitterly and said, "Just the guard of the secret passage has already caused us so much trouble. If King Amos has more than one powerful person by his side, the possibility of us getting close to him or the princess is almost zero. Don't forget, the current royal family is connected by marriage with the strongest dragon clan in the continent." Dr. Gores remembered how he was almost killed by the will of the chessboard when he casually said that he wanted to create a virus to torture the whole world. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. "So, the only thing we can do now is to take the path of the martial arts competition. As expected, without a powerful captain, we are at a disadvantage." At this moment, something suddenly fell from the bridge, interrupting the discussion of the three people in the castle. Scared, they weren't scared, but their reactions were a little bigger. "It looks like a person." Mr. Sneeve frowned. "It's really a human." Dr. Gores nodded and led the way. What they saw was a figure lying directly on the ground, fell from the bridge. Dr. Gores frowned and turned the person over directly. What he saw was an old man with dark and dry skin, with a strong charcoal smell, and a short blade was inserted in the man's chest at this time. "This guy is dead." Dr. Gores made a preliminary judgment after a simple glance. Then, he squatted down, pinched the man's limbs, and finally pulled out the short blade inserted in the man's chest. "It should be a fatal stab to the heart." Dr. Gores thought for a moment and said, looking at his angry expression, "It may be that he was attacked most of the time. The time of death is about an hour. Well, it's nothing. It's just a corpse." It was indeed nothing. The three people in the castle were naturally familiar with the corpse, but this was the place where they planned to spend the night. It was a very unpleasant thing to have a corpse in front of the door. "Just dig a hole and fill it." Dr. Gores looked at Sneeve and said indifferently, "Old man, this is your job. Leave it to me. I'm going to sleep." Sneeve snorted and ignored him. He didn't do anything. Dr. Gores bared his teeth and wanted to scold him. But before he could say anything, another figure jumped out. How dare you? How dare you kill people in the King's City? It was a young man in a black uniform. He looked cold and angry. I'm the second captain of the King's City Guards, peace between man and nature. Ferocious criminal, hurry up and surrender. Dr. Gores opened his mouth and looked at Tina. Tina frowned and looked at Sneeve. Sneeve rolled his eyes and turned to sleep. I said I didn't kill him. He was killed and fell from above. Do you believe me? Dr. Gores sighed and said, Nonsense. The murder weapon is clearly in your hands. The self-proclaimed second captain of the King's City Guards, peace between man and nature, snorted and said, I just happened to pass by. I clearly saw you take out the murder weapon from the corpse. Dr. Gores shook his head and didn't bother to argue. He shrugged and said, Well, I'll take it that I killed him. There's nothing else for you to do. Let's go. I'm not in a good mood tonight. I don't mind killing another one of you. Do you admit it? Dr. Peace between man and nature snorted and took out an iron chain from behind his waist. He waved his other arm and stretched out a whip. Follow me back to the guards department and explain the murder in detail. Just take it as a pre-sleep exercise. Dr. Gores twisted his neck and threw the dagger he pulled out from the corpse. He caught it and said with a chuckle, Be careful. My dagger is very fast, especially when it's aimed at the face. With a flash of silver light, Dr. Gores disappeared in a flash. Miss Maid yawned and planned to go back and find a place to rest. Unexpectedly, the moment she turned around, a figure flew past her and crashed into Sneeve. The figure that flew out was Dr. Gores. You! Tina turned around abruptly. Dr. Peace between man and nature still looked cold and stern. His eyes were like lightning. The moment he looked at her, she felt as if a sharp sword was pointed at her throat. Murder is a crime. The criminal will be punished by the kingdom's law. Follow me back to the guards department and explain yourself. As she spoke, the maid felt her vision turn black, and she lost consciousness. Oh my God! Dr. Gores spat out blood and got up. What's wrong with this King's City instance? The script is wrong. How can a random cat or dog be so powerful? Puff! Dr. Gores fell to the ground and then Sneeve. He didn't even see clearly how peace between man and nature attacked. The ancient castle trio was detained. After Dr. Peace between man and nature tied the three people with the chain, he walked to the deceased and wanted to find out the identity of the deceased. But when he saw the appearance of the deceased, he couldn't help but be shocked. Who is this? King's City was still bustling. It was still early in the morning, but the sound of peddlers shouting could be heard on the street. When Tang Tianlin came to one of the rooms in the hotel that he rented in advance, Lady Nan was slicing cucumbers and sticking them on her face. Tang Tianlin frowned and looked at the various kinds of food in the room. He couldn't help but ask in a low voice, What are you doing? Can't you see? Eating breakfast. Nan Xiaonan rolled her eyes and said, These are all included in the rent. If I don't order them, won't I be letting the owner take advantage of me? Tang Tianlin opened his mouth and then said indifferently, I only said that I would exchange information with you here. I didn't say that I could let you stay here. I didn't plan to meet you here. Don't worry. Nan Xiaonan said indifferently, How big is a grid on the chessboard? So many of our cards are squeezed on this grid. Maybe it's not me who's pressing you, but you who's pressing me. Maybe there's another card on top of me. As long as you don't take the initiative to reveal it to your master, if Lady Gong Lina knows, I'll swallow the whole cucumber on the table. Come, have you eaten breakfast? Let's eat together? Tang Tianlin sighed and sat down. He thought for a while and said, Yesterday I accidentally met Wally on the street. He entered a weapon shop and took away an item. I don't know what it is, but my intuition tells me that this thing should be more important than the legacy that he took in several places in King City. Maybe it's something to deal with you. Weapon shop? Nan Xiaonan muttered. Yesterday, she had used her visualization technique to sense the fluctuations of the stone slab fragment. However, as she searched for it, the fluctuations had suddenly disappeared. She had actually gone to a weapon shop. The Lock's weapon shop. Tang Tianlin nodded at this time. This weapon shop seems to be a bit special. You should pay more attention to it. Why, do you know this weapon shop? Nan Xiaonan blinked and quickly shook her head. She said casually, Nothing, I just think that the name of this weapon shop is too low. There's nothing special about it. Then what did you do yesterday? Tang Tianlin thought for a while and asked. Nan Xiaonan spread butter on the bread and said, I didn't do anything. I just came here yesterday. I just wanted to familiarize myself with the streets here. The most I asked was about the upcoming competition. I didn't get anything. The competition will start in 3 days, you still have some time. Tang Tianlin nodded and then said, I plan to go to the arena today. Nan Xiaonan said in surprise, Is it the arena that is rumored to be set up by the kingdom's princess? I heard that as long as you get 10 consecutive wins, you can directly enter the kingdom and have a chance to see the kingdom's princess and get a reward. Are you going to see the princess now? Tang Tianlin nodded. The final summon of the kingdom's guardian needs the kingdom's bloodline. No matter what, it's good to find out the princess's actual situation in advance. And I keep feeling that there's something in the palace calling out to me. As he said that, Tang Tianlin suddenly grabbed his left arm. By the way, do you feel anything special in the past 2 days? It's fine for now. Nan Xiaonan thought for a while and said, I won't be here for a while. Don't worry, it won't affect my actions. That's not what I'm asking. Nan Xiaonan shrugged and placed a piece of bread with butter in front of Tang Tianlin. Eat it, you bought it with your money. Take your time to eat. Tang Tianlin sighed and stood up. After I come out from the palace, I will be here again. If everything goes well, I should be able to leave by tomorrow night. I won't be seeing you off. Tang Tianlin shook his head and picked up the bread. Then, he pushed open the door and walked out. After closing the door, Nan Xiaonan walked into the bathroom. She picked up a knife, the one she had just used to smear the cream on her face. Then, she blew on the knife and stepped on the pedal to shave her leg hair. What's wrong with being a witch? Witches don't need to eat, witches don't need leg hair, witches can even pluck nose hair. She opened her eyes at once. Her silky hair hung down loosely. She bought a new spaghetti strap pajamas yesterday, and one of the straps hung down to her arm. Rubbing her eyes, she opened her eyes again and looked around. Alea in white. You're awake. Did you sleep well last night? Boss Luo's voice sounded at this moment. He was sitting in front of the balcony and drinking a cup of black tea. There was also some simple breakfast on the small tea table. This is the first time I tried to sleep. Araya in white clothes suddenly said, It feels strange. What strange? Boss Luo asked curiously. Araya in white clothes thought for a while and said, It feels like a long time has passed, but it's only one night. But in fact, I've experienced 6 reboots of this world. It never felt like a long time. Why? Did you have a dream? Boss Luo suddenly asked. Araya in white clothes shook her head. Boss Luo said, Actually, humans all dream when they sleep. The only difference is that some people can remember and some people can forget. Then, Araya in white clothes tilted her head in confusion. Then, Boss Luo chuckled and said, Then it's time to get up. Congratulations, not only did you fall asleep for the first time, but you also successfully stayed in bed for the first time. Araya in white clothes opened her mouth, and then fell into silence. She suddenly sighed, a very human-like sigh. Then, she got up from the bed. Just as she was about to change her clothes, she saw that the bed beside her had been tidied up. She thought for a while, and then started tidying up her own bed. Araya in white clothes, who had just dressed up and was advised by Boss Luo to wash up, obediently walked into the bathroom. At this moment there was a knock on the door. Jillian, it's so early. Boss Luo was surprised to see Jillian outside the door. His breath was uneven and his face was slightly pale. There was even a trace of fear. What's the matter? Jillian's eyes were red at this time, as if he had cried. He said sadly, Mr. Luo, my father is dead. He was killed last night. He was on guard early this morning. Chapter 1837. Early in the morning, the royal guard sent someone to Locke's weapon shop, and woke up Jillian, who was still asleep, hoping that he could go to the guard division to identify the body. Jillian went over and quickly recognized that the deceased was indeed her father, Max. The time of death was late last night. The culprits were 3 undocumented people living under a bridge in the West District. They were caught on the spot by the guard division. Jillian sat down, but could not hide the grief in his heart. I heard that it may be because of murder and robbery, but it's still in the interrogation stage. How could this be? Although father is usually not serious, he's not a bad person. He also often goes to Maple Leaf Tavern to support those women who have lost their way. Jillian mentioned that he was an orphan without parents, and was raised by Max since he was young. There was no need to say much about the relationship between the two. No matter how sad Jillian looked at this time, there was nothing strange about it. Why did you come specially to tell me this? Boss Luo suddenly asked. You should have just come out of the Royal Guard Division, but you came here immediately to find me. Is there a reason? Just to tell me that Mr. Max was killed? Jillian opened his mouth and stuttered for a while before he sighed and said with an ashamed face, I'm sorry, Mr. Luo. Your sword may have been lost. I'm sorry. Luoqiu did not fluctuate much. After calmly pouring a glass of water for Jillian, he said slowly, Can you be more specific? Jillian had no choice but to continue. Actually, after you guys left yesterday, Dad couldn't find you. At that time, I felt that it was a little strange because not only did Dad not see you, the sword you left in the weapon shop for maintenance also disappeared. I guess that Dad must have taken it away, but I don't understand why he would do that. Then, the news of Father's death was confirmed this morning, but I asked the Guard Division people, and they said that they did not find a similar sword at the scene. That means the whereabouts of your sword, Mr. Luo, is temporarily unknown. With that, Jillian suddenly knelt on the floor and said with shame, I'm sorry, Mr. Luo. You trusted me so much, but we lost your important weapon. I'm sorry. Boss Luo looked at Jillian and suddenly asked, Which do you think is more serious? Losing my weapon or Mr. Max's death? Jillian couldn't help but be startled. It's father, Luoqiu said softly. Since Mr. Max's murder is more serious, I think what you need to do now is not to apologize to me, but to find the truth, right? But I really don't know what to do right now. Jillian shook his head. I have no clue right now. As long as something has been done, there will be traces left behind. Boss Luo gestured for Jillian to sit up and slowly said, Perhaps there are some traces that only you can discover, because to Mr. Max, perhaps you are the person in the world who knows him the best. Me? Jillian opened his mouth. But when Father died, I wasn't at the scene. Then go to the scene and take a look. But at this moment, a strange voice suddenly sounded. It came from outside the door. At the same time, the door opened automatically. Then he saw a young man wearing the uniform of the Royal City Guards Division outside the door. He was holding a sword and leaning against the wall of the corridor. His gaze was like a knife, looking straight at them. You are. Jillian was startled. He didn't recognize the Royal City Guards who suddenly appeared outside the door. At this time, the young man walked directly into the room and said indifferently, My name is Peace Between Man and Nature, the second chief of the Royal City Guards Division. The murder that happened last night was handled by me. But why are you here? Jillian asked subconsciously. The young man, Peace Between Man and Nature, looked at Boss Luo casually, then stared at Jillian and said, Since you left the guards division, I have been following you, until you came to this hotel and met the people here. You followed me. You followed. Ji Lian suddenly frowned and said with slight anger, even if you are from the guards division, can you just casually ask about other people's privacy? Peace between man and nature said indifferently, last night's murder, although I caught 3 suspects on the spot, they insisted that they were innocent after being interrogated for an entire night. Of course, I caught them with my own hands, and the evidence was conclusive, so I couldn't just let them go because they cried injustice for an entire night. Until you came this morning, I found some suspicious points. Me? Ji Lian opened his mouth in surprise. Peace between man and nature said, although you were very nervous about Max's murder, you were also nervous when you mentioned a sword. I was a little concerned at that time, and then you left the guards division and came here. Ji Lian could only say, the sword was given to us by Mr. Luo yesterday for maintenance. Now that the sword is lost, shouldn't I be nervous? Losing a customer's weapon is a huge blow to the reputation of the shop. If word gets out, how can Locke's armory establish itself in the royal city in the future? Peace between man and nature sneered, as far as I know, this shop has never had a good reputation. If it is not delaying customers' time, it is often arguing with customers. It doesn't seem to have any reputation. As for establishing itself, now that the only qualified blacksmith in the kingdom, Max, has been killed, and according to our investigation, you are just an apprentice, not qualified to open a shop. In other words, this shop, from now on, can no longer operate. You! Ji Lian gritted his teeth and suddenly stood up, but soon sat down dejectedly, looking like he had lost his soul. Peace between man and nature looked at him and suddenly said, although the shop can no longer operate, finding out the truth for the dead is something you can still do as long as you are alive. Since you are Max's adopted son, and the person who knows him best is you, I think you have an obligation to do this. Ji Lian looked up at him. Peace between man and nature took out an item. It was wrapped in a handkerchief. After opening it, there was a small piece of metal inside. What is this? Ji Lian asked, puzzled. This was found in Max's palm when we were examining the body. Peace between man and nature said indifferently. His fist was holding this item tightly. It should be from an accessory or something like that. If we go further, it might be something that Max took from the murderer when he was fighting with him. The 3 people you arrested on the spot? I've checked. They didn't have anything like that on them. Peace between man and nature thought for a while and said, even so, it doesn't prove that they are not suspicious. So, I hope you can come with me to the scene to see if there are any new clues. Also, this gentleman can come with us. Peace between man and nature looked at Luochio and said indifferently, I've heard. Since your weapon was lost in Max's hands, and the weapon was lost after the crime, you can't be separated from this murder case for the time being. Of course, I'm not suspecting you. I just don't want to let go of any clues and wrongly accuse any innocent people. It was this familiar smell. Boss Luo had been listening from the side. From the moment peace between man and nature came in, he had been looking at the second in command of the king's city guards division. This was the feeling he got. Before becoming a boss, Luochio grew up in a family like this. His father was a police officer, and his uncles and aunts were all professionals in this profession. It was very familiar from the second in command of the guards division. If there's anything I can do to help, I'll be happy to. Boss Luo smiled. My name is Luo. Luo? Peace between man and nature nodded. Okay, I'll remember. Let's go now. I've already ordered people to seal off the crime scene last night. But we need to move quickly because the astrology department predicted a heavy rain later. The sky outside was already a little gloomy. Dr. Gores was staring at the lock of the cell in a daze, frowning from time to time. It was really miserable. His hands were shackled with special shackles at this time, and his power as a professional was all sealed. The only comfort at this time was that he, Tina, and Sneeve were all locked up in the same place. Finally, they could share the burden together. How can the guy called Peace Between Man and Nature be so powerful? Dr. Gores suddenly quivered at this time and said incredulously, in all the novels, movies, and even games, the characters such as policemen are *king trash. Miss Maid pondered. Maybe it's because the novels you've read, wait, they're not the protagonists of the police? That's not scientific. Dr. Gores snorted twice. We can't just wait for death. What we're facing now may be murder. They were now locked in the cell. If they were convicted in the end, it seemed that, if they were not sentenced to death, they would be imprisoned for a long time. In the world of the chessboard game, anything could happen, but if they were sentenced to death or imprisoned for a long time as servants, it would be too tragic. But we can't do anything now. Tina shook her head and said, our power is sealed. Does the King's City's garrison division have such means? We didn't know that before. We have to find a way to inform the outside. Dr. Gores said seriously, don't count on Sneeve, his master is just a dog. Now we can only count on Tiff and Nelson. Why did Nelson take so long to cook a meal? Hasn't Tiff woken up yet? Miss Maid shook her head. Right at this moment, a prisoner was dragged past their cell door, leaving behind a long trail of blood. This prisoner's legs had actually been amputated. The guard who dragged the prisoner glared at Gores and the other two in the cell and said fiercely, see, this is the consequence of not telling the truth. If you don't tell the truth, you'll be next. Dr. Girls gulped subconsciously. Don't panic when you encounter a problem. Nelson, you bastard, come back? Trash. The guard snorted coldly and continued to drag the unconscious prisoner away. It was a cloudy day on the way to the crime scene. Because they were in the car called by Peace Between Man and Nature. The car had the badge of the King's City's garrison division, so there was no obstruction along the way. Boss Luo asked curiously, since the three murderers were caught on the spot by Mr. Peace Between Man and Nature, why are you suspicious of this matter? Is it because you found an unknown metal fragment in Mr. Max's palm? Mr. Peace Between Man and Nature glanced at him indifferently. The garrison division shouldn't talk about the details of the case to outsiders. But for some reason, he just wanted to say. Maybe it was because he found the other party pleasing to the eye? According to the confessions of the three suspects that I caught last night, they saw Max's body being thrown off the bridge, so they went up to investigate out of curiosity. As for the act of taking out the weapon from the body, although it was a bit rash, it didn't mean that similar things didn't happen before. In fact, when I was patrolling, I only saw them taking out the weapon, but I didn't really kill anyone. So, if we can't find evidence to prove that they did it, we can't convict them. So, you actually came out to find evidence to convict the three suspects. Jillian looked at the second chief of the garrison division strangely. If he was the second chief, his position should be quite high, right? Since when did the garrison division of the King's City take things so seriously? What he heard were more stories of torture. There's a more important point. Mr. Peace Between Man and Nature suddenly said, the three suspects that I caught were too weak. They probably didn't have the qualifications to kill Max. Jillian couldn't help but show a puzzled expression. Mr. Peace Between Man and Nature said indifferently, don't you know? Max had already reached the top of the adventurers on the continent 20 years ago because of his amazing hammer battle skills. He was once named the Explosive Hammer King. A figure on the same level as the few sword saints. How could such a strong person be killed by a few petty thieves? Those three trash couldn't even take one hit from me. The Max you're talking about, is it really the same person as my old man, Max? Jillian couldn't help but open his mouth wide. Mr. Peace Between Man and Nature said, at first, I didn't believe it either, but when I checked Max's body, I found the Le Saint mark on his body. Only a strong person who stepped into the Holy Realm can have the Le Saint mark. Later, I tracked down the files of the Adventurers Union and confirmed that Max was the explosive Hammer King. Julien was completely in disbelief, as if he had seen a ghost. He subconsciously said, "What about the mark? Could it be that you saw wrongly?" Mr. Peace Between Man and Nature said indifferently, "No, I've seen the Saint Mark before, so I can't be wrong." Julien still wanted to struggle. He felt that it was hard to match his old man with the all-powerful figure 20 years ago. "Maybe what you saw before was also wrong." Mr. Peace Between Man and Nature snorted, "My teacher is one of the Sword Saints, and what I saw was his Saint Mark. Do you have any more questions?" Julien opened his mouth. "Okay. Anyway, the 3 suspects last night were trash. They couldn't even beat you, and your teacher is one of the Sword Saints, and my old man is also a figure on the same level as the Sword Saint. Those 3 trash couldn't even beat them. So the chances of them being the murderers are very small, right?" Mr. Peace Between Man and Nature didn't care. He just pulled up the curtain and looked outside. "We're here, let's get out of the car." Chapter 1838. On the bridge. In fact, ever since the identity of the deceased Max was confirmed, Peace Between Man and Nature's suspicion towards the 3 nobodies they caught last night had been largely eliminated. Naturally, the more suspicious targets would start from the people around Mac. He had been observing Julien's every move along the way. This is the place where Pops was killed last night? Take a look and see if you can find anything special," Peace Between Man and Nature said casually. Then, she leaned on the railing and seemed to be casually looking at the pedestrians on both sides of the bridge. Julien subconsciously looked at Boss Luo, who came along the same way. After receiving a somewhat encouraging gaze, she took a deep breath and began to seriously observe every inch of the bridge. "Who are you?" Peace Between Man and Nature suddenly looked at Boss Luo and White Clocarea and asked, "Looking at you, you don't look like residents of the royal capital." "We just came to the royal capital not too long ago. It was only a day or 2 ago," Boss Luo answered truthfully. Peace Between Man and Nature tilted her head and asked, "Do you have a pass or something like that on you? Please let me take a look at your identification document." Of course, Boss Luo did not have such a thing on him. Along the way, they had not been able to obtain such a thing from killing monsters. "You don't have anything to prove your identity?" Peace Between Man and Nature narrowed her eyes. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "I think I lost it. On the way here, it was stolen?" "Do I look like I'm easy to fool?" Peace Between Man and Nature suddenly blinked and asked curiously. Boss Luo could only smile and said, "Actually, I don't have those things you are talking about." "Sir, are you planning to take us siblings back to the garrison for interrogation?" Peace Between Man and Nature shrugged and said, "Why would I take you back? Because of the competition in the capital, all sorts of people were flocking to the capital, and among them were many potential criminals. Over the past few days, the guards' prison has long been overcrowded. Even if I take you back, there won't even be a place for you to squat. You don't have to go through so much trouble. Just follow me while I'm working on the case. I heard that you lost a weapon from Max, right? What kind of weapon is it?" Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "It's a sword called Great Holy Light Sword. It seems to have another name, Aurora's Aster." Peace Between Man and Nature nodded, and then her eyes widened. "What did you say? Aurora's Aster. Holy Sword Aurora's Aster, one of the 3 godly weapons in the world?" "I think so." Boss Luo nodded. The Minister of Peace Between Man and Nature opened his mouth. After a moment of silence, he asked seriously, "Do I look like I'm that easy to fool?" "Mr. Peace Between Man and Nature, you don't believe me?" "I believe you." The Minister of Peace Between Man and Nature shook his head. "Aurora's Aster, I believe you. There are many holy swords in the guards. Why wouldn't I believe you?" "There are many holy swords." Boss Luo was slightly surprised. The Minister of Peace Between Man and Nature shrugged and said, "Not only is there a basket full of holy swords, There is also a cart full of the other 2 godly weapons. It's not something strange. During this period of time, the weapons dealers in the capital are selling all kinds of godly weapons. They are specifically used to scam people like you who are rich but have no experience in the martial arts world. Every day you dream of going out, you can find a godly weapon at a roadside stall, and you can find a peerless secret book by jumping off a cliff. See, at the 3rd stall under the bridge, aren't they selling holy swords? That holy sword of yours, you must have spent a lot of money to buy it, right? Boss Luo looked at the stall that the Minister of Peace between Man and Nature pointed at. He shook his head and said, "That's right, if it's really the legendary holy sword, it shouldn't be as easy as it was for me to get it." The Minister of Peace between Man and Nature thought that Roland was avoiding the topic because he didn't want to talk about how much money he was scammed. He didn't have the intention to be sarcastic, so he said calmly, "A truly strong person is strong in the heart, not relying on godly weapons." He wanted to say a few words of encouragement, but Ji Lian had already trotted back. "Did you find anything?" The Minister of Peace between Man and Nature changed the topic and asked directly. Ji Lian shook her head and said, "Nothing special." "I see." The Minister of Peace between Man and Nature nodded and said regretfully, "It seems that the only clue left is the metal fragment hidden in Max's hand." At this time, Ji Lian suddenly said, "Celestial Lord Mu, can you let me see the weapon that killed my father?" "What do you want to do?" Ji Lian said, "I want to see if there are any special markings on the weapon. When a craftsman makes a weapon, he will leave his own unique markings. Maybe we can start from there? We are in this line of work, so we can tell at a glance." "I've already checked." The Minister of Peace between Man and Nature said directly, "Since we didn't find anything here, then let's go to the next place, which is the shop that sold this dagger." "Then let's not waste any time," Ji Lian said anxiously. Boss Luo said at this time, "Can you wait for me for a while? I'll be right there." The Minister of Peace between Man and Nature looked at Boss Luo in surprise. Not only did he want to do something, but he saw Boss Luo walking straight to the 3rd stall under the bridge. The Minister of Peace between Man and Nature couldn't help but frown. Did this guy buy his holy sword from this stall? Revenge? He wasn't seeking revenge. When the Minister of Peace between Man and Nature and Ji Lian followed, they saw Boss Luo holding a long sword inlaid with many gems and looking at it. The stall owner was sparing no effort to promote this sword as a good weapon that could cut iron like mud. "Mr. Luo, are you going to buy this sword?" Ji Lian asked tentatively. Luoqiu nodded and said, "Yes, I don't have any weapon at the moment, so I'm going to buy one for self-defense. Is there a problem?" "No problem, but..." Ji Lian ran a weapon shop himself. How could he not know what kind of weapon this stall was selling? He directly pulled the Boss Luo and said quickly, "Mr. Luo, if you want a weapon for self-defense, there are still some sharp ones in my weapon shop. It's our fault to lose your sword. You don't need to buy it here. I'll go back and get you some good ones for you to choose. Of course, this is not a compensation." "No, this one is good." Boss Luo smiled casually, wearing the sword in the stall. "It's about the same length as my previous one. I'll take this one." Looking at Mr. Luo's face, it seemed that the words, "stupid, rich, come quickly," were written on his face. Ji Lian opened his mouth. But in the end, he gave up persuading him. The stall owner's eyes were about to kill him. It was the kind of sad eyes that said, "Why bother to make things difficult for a fellow peer?" At this time, Peace between Man and Nature only felt that this adventurer from the outside was a little strange. There was someone in the world who was willing to buy a fake. He shook his head and said indifferently, "I've bought the weapon, it's time to go." After Boss Luo paid the money, he suddenly thought of something and asked, "Mr. Peace between Man and Nature, about the murder last night, did you ask the surrounding residents about anything suspicious?" "I did ask some, but I didn't ask all of them." Peace between Man and Nature shook his head and said, We are seriously understaffed. However, from the statements that we have asked, we haven't found anything for the time being. Our people from the Guards Division will continue to follow up on this side." Boss Luo nodded and immediately looked at the stall owner. "Boss, I want to ask you something. Did anything special happen last night?" "You mean about the murder?" The stall owner counted the money he had earned and his attitude couldn't be better. "In the morning, someone from the Guards Division came to ask me, but I really don't know anything. I was tired last night and went to bed early. Basically, I didn't wake up, let alone see the murder process or suspicious people. I'm sorry, customer, I can't help you." "It's okay, I'm just asking." Boss Luo smiled casually. "It's just that I saw that you don't seem to be very energetic, so I thought you must have gone to bed very late last night." The stall owner said, "I went to bed very early, but I didn't sleep well the whole night. In the middle of the night, De Huang at home was very noisy and kept barking nonstop. It took a while for it to stop. Oh, little miss, be careful, there are rats." At this time, the stall owner hurriedly looked at the white shirt Araya and hurriedly said, "Little miss, don't let these dirty rats get on your clothes." "And why are there so many rats?" Jilian frowned. "Just now on the bridge, I saw that there were quite a lot of rats on both sides. I don't know, they were like this when I woke up early in the morning. They all ran out. We also caught them for a long time before we opened the stall." The stall owner shook his head. "Usually, it's not like this. They don't know what they are afraid of, so they ran out." Peace between man and nature's expression suddenly changed. He secretly looked at Boss Luo and saw that Luochio was not acting strangely at this time. He was just carefully tidying up Araya's clothes. Peace between man and nature immediately dodged and jumped on the bridge, arriving at the side of a guard stationed here. "Greetings, Second Minister." Peace between man and nature thought for a while and said, "Go back to the Guards Division and ask an astrologer to come over. Let him distinguish the aura around here and see if there were any monsters or the like that passed by last night and left behind a special aura." "Okay, I'll go right away." After giving orders, peace between man and nature quietly returned to Jilian and Boss Luo's side and said indifferently, "We've bought the sword and asked. It's getting late, we have to go to the next place. Let's go. Please lead the way, Mr. Peace between man and nature." Boss Luo held Araya's small hand and said. They quickly arrived at the weapon shop that sold the murder weapon. It was a shop that was much more luxurious than Locke's Arms, and had good business. "There are so many customers who come to buy things here every day, how can we remember all of them clearly?" The shop assistant shook his head and dismissed. "This is a murder weapon. It was sold from you." Peace between man and nature said directly, "Now, the Guards Division suspects that this shop is related to a major murder case that happened last night. I need to ask all of you to cooperate with the investigation." "Sir, I remembered wrongly. I think I have some recollection of this dagger. Explain it in detail." Peace between man and nature said expressionlessly. The shop assistant thought for a moment and said, "This dagger should have been bought by a man wearing a silver mask yesterday. The mask is quite special, it only shows one eye, so it left a deep impression. When? Around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I really can't remember the exact time. A man wearing a silver mask." Peace between man and nature nodded, but at this time, he saw that Jilian's expression had changed. He directly stared at Jilian's eyes and asked in a deep voice, "Did you think of something or know something?" "I." Jilian opened his mouth and looked at Boss Luo next to him as if asking for help. In the end, he felt that he could not hide it, so he said in a panic, It could be Uncle Zayart. He is Father's friend for many years. Yesterday, Father also came to the weapon shop to visit him before he disappeared. But Uncle Zayart would not kill Father. They have been friends for so many years, how could? Uncle Zayart is very nice, and he is also good to me. I don't know if he is good or not." Peace between man and nature said indifferently, I only know that someone died. I need to find out who the murderer is. Take me to this person called Zayart. Julien gritted his teeth and said, Uncle Zayart should be living beside Leroy Street in the southern 6th district, but I don't know if he is there. He is a traveling merchant and often travels around. Peace between man and nature directly grabbed Julien's arm and walked out quickly. By the way, when the customer bought this dagger yesterday, did he buy anything else or say anything? Boss Luo suddenly took the opportunity to ask the shop assistant. I don't think he bought anything. The shop assistant shook his head. There was nothing special, it was just a normal conversation. Oh, by the way, there is one thing. What is it? The shop assistant thought for a while and said, Later on, there was a young man who looked like a noble young master. He seemed to know the masked man. They said a few words, and the masked man put down the money for the weapon and left together. The young master seemed to call himself Wally? That's the name, right? You have a good memory. Boss Luo smiled slightly. The shop assistant said, As shop assistants, it is necessary for us to have a good memory, so that we can remember the preferences of the customers. Boss Luo said casually, I also have a shop assistant, his memory is not very good, and he doesn't get much. Then did you deduct his salary? The shop assistant laughed. Probably, there is not much to deduct. Boss Luo waved his hand and called Ray out. They quickly arrived at the address mentioned by Julien. But this was an empty house, as if no one had lived here for a long time. Chapter 1839. Although it wasn't luxuriant, it still looked like it had been uninhabited for quite some time. They had already walked into this empty house. Peace between man and nature swept a layer of dust off the furniture with her finger, stared at Julien and asked, Is this really the residence of the traveling merchant Zayart you mentioned? Julien said, It's definitely here, this is Uncle Zayart's home. He often goes out and leaves the capital for a long time, so I occasionally come here to clean for him. How long has it been since you last came here? Peace between man and nature frowned. Julien said, Almost 2 months. During this time, the business of the weapon shop wasn't very good, so I wasn't in the mood. You said that this person called Zayart only appeared yesterday. Peace between man and nature said expressionlessly, You mean he came back to the capital, but didn't go back to his home? That should be the case. Julien nodded, then pointed to a cup on the table and said, This cup should be where I drank when I was cleaning last time. It hasn't been touched yet. Why did Zayart appear yesterday to look for you and Max? There's nothing special about it. Julien recalled and said, He said that he just came back to the capital and passed by our shop, so he came in to take a look. That's right, Uncle Zayart should have been drinking with Dad for a while. When he came out, I smelled alcohol. But, now that I think about it, Dad's reaction after that was a bit strange. What's strange? Peace between man and nature asked. Julien thought for a while and said, Dad should have drunk too much and only woke up after Uncle Zayart left. But after he woke up, he asked about Uncle Zayart's whereabouts. It seemed like he was in a hurry. Also, Julien shook her head. Nothing, it's just that Dad told Mr. Luo that he would have to wait for 3 days before taking the weapon. Why wait for 3 days? Dad said that Mr. Luo's sword is very special, and it takes a lot of time to maintain it. Julien thought for a moment and said, I think this might just be an excuse. He must have been drunk at the time and was not in a good state, so he found an excuse. Dad often delays customers' work, and he often doesn't make a move until the last moment. I've already told him many times, but he can't do anything. So he said to wait for 3 days. I guess his old habit is acting up again. The Minister of Peace between man and nature thought for a while and said, Did the Zayart you speak of leave empty-handed? Yeah. Julien nodded and immediately reacted. You don't think Uncle Zayart stole Mr. Luo's weapon, do you? How could this be? Uncle Zayart and Dad have been good friends for decades, Sometimes he would even bring back some precious materials for Dad. Why would he do such a thing? Any possibility is questionable. The Minister of Peace between man and nature said indifferently, "Anyway, according to your previous confession, you haven't seen the sword since Max took it into the small workshop. That is to say, when the sword was lost, you can't be sure at all, right?" Jillian opened her mouth but couldn't refute. She could only clench her teeth and say, "Uncle Zayart wouldn't do such a thing, and he wouldn't kill Dad. You don't know this, but there was one year when Uncle Zayart specially rushed back from out of town on Dad's birthday. It was raining heavily that night, and he was completely drenched, but he still remembered to buy Dad's favorite food. If you say the two of them loved each other, I'll believe it, but if you say they killed each other, I'll eat this cup." Perhaps the topic of two old men loving and killing each other was too heavy. The Minister of Peace between man and nature waved her hand and shook her head. She said, "Let's not talk about this for now, but the person who bought the weapon is very likely Zayart. You can't deny this point. Since you're certain that Zayart didn't commit the crime, then the reason why we're looking for him isn't to capture him, but to clarify the whole story and to prove his innocence. You also wish to clear the suspicion of this Uncle Zayart, right?" "What do you want me to do?" The Minister of Peace between man and nature patted Jillian's shoulder. "You said Max and him were good friends for many years, and their relationship was quite deep. So I think, if he's still in the capital, once he hears the news of Max's death, he won't be indifferent. He will come looking for you, and I need you to find a way to inform me at that time, and find a way to keep Zayart." Jillian opened her mouth. "Zayart needs to prove his innocence, and Max's death can't be unknown." The Minister of Peace between man and nature said seriously, "They are all important people to you. I think you should know what to do." Okay. Jillian was silent for a moment, but finally nodded. The Minister of Peace between man and nature didn't stay for long. She quickly said goodbye to Jillian and Luaccio, got on the Guard Division's special car and left. In Zayart's residence, only Boss Luo and the other two were left. Jillian had a dazed look at this time, this almost adult youth. Perhaps the things he experienced today had exceeded the scope of his growth in these 10 years. "I'm sorry, Mr. Luo, I didn't expect you to be involved in this matter. Do you think that Mr. Zayart will come looking for you?" Boss Luo suddenly asked. "Such a big thing happened, if he heard about it, he will definitely come," Jillian said with certainty, "but Uncle Zayart often leaves without warning. I'm afraid that after he left the weapons shop yesterday, he left the capital. If that's the case, then the suspicion on Uncle Zayart is really, really hard to clear." "It seems that he is really good to you," Boss Luo said casually. "Otherwise, you wouldn't be so worried about him." Jillian said faintly, "I was an orphan when I was young. I was raised by my old man. My old man is like my biological father. But when I was growing up, Uncle Zayart was like a person I looked forward to. He told me a lot of things outside, told me a lot of things, brought me a lot of gift. That kind of feeling is different." Luaccio said, "I also have an uncle like that. He always teaches me a lot of things." Jillian subconsciously looked up at Boss Luo. Luaccio looked at him, smiled and said, "It must be a very happy thing to have such an uncle in your growing-up life. I always feel." Jillian was startled, and said subconsciously, "Mr. Luo's smile always gives people a kind of power. I feel my mood suddenly become better. It will be my pleasure." Luaccio smiled faintly. "Let's go back to the weapon shop. Maybe Mr. Zayart is already waiting for you." "That's right, it's possible." Jillian nodded. "No matter how depressed I am, it's useless now. I must find the real murderer of my old man. This is what I should do now." Boss Luo nodded encouragingly. They planned to leave Zayart's residence now. "By the way, do you know who the woman in this painting is?" Boss Luo pointed to a painting hanging in the room and asked before leaving. "I don't know." Jillian shook his head. "It seems to have been hanging here for a long time." I remember once I asked Uncle Zayart about the woman in the painting. He seemed to be a little depressed at that time. I didn't ask him again after that. Will there be any clues? I'm just a little curious. Boss Luo shook his head and said softly, "Let's go." Sir, they left Zehart's residence. It seems that they are going back to Locke's weapon shop. On the second floor of a tea house on Luwa Street, peace between man and nature was boiling a pot of hot water. The hot water was boiling. He poured it directly into a cup, and drank it directly without waiting for the hot water to cool down. The subordinate who was reporting to him couldn't help but feel a dull pain in his tongue. You continue to follow. Peace between man and nature stood up directly at this time. Report to me immediately if there is any movement. I want to go to the palace. The subordinate looked around and then asked tentatively, "Sir, are you going to the palace to see the Sword Saint?" If the person who died was just an ordinary palace craftsman, I wouldn't be interested in this case. Peace between man and nature said indifferently, but the person who died was Explosive Hammer King, who disappeared for 20 years. Don't you think that the background behind this case is not simple? My teacher and Explosive Hammer King were from the same generation. Although I didn't hear about any friendship between them, he should know more than us when we were young. You go, be careful not to be discovered, especially the black-haired young man beside Jillian. He is not simple. He was just a young master from a rich family. There was nothing special about him, and he even brought a little girl who didn't know about the world. Even so, the subordinate didn't want to reveal his thoughts. He lowered his head, answered yes, and quickly left the tea-house. 3 godly weapons. Aurora's aster? Peace between man and nature muttered thoughtfully at this time. It is said that there is another 3 godly weapons in the palace. Stop, this is the palace of Her Highness. Unauthorized people are not allowed to enter. The heavily armored guards appeared in front of peace between man and nature, showing their sharp weapons and killing intent. It was said that many of the guards here were from the fighting arena. Peace between man and nature casually reached out and pressed down the crossed spears in front of him. I am peace between man and nature, the second in command of the King's Guard Division. I am not here to see Her Highness. I know that I am here to see the Sword Saint. I am his student. If I can't go with you, please help me inform him. Please wait a moment. The guards didn't directly let him in, but they didn't refuse either. Soon, they sent someone to confirm. Peace between man and nature stood outside the palace and waited. Soon, a middle-aged man in white walked out slowly accompanied by several guards. Peace between man and nature greets teacher. Peace between man and nature quickly became respectful at this time. The middle-aged man in white, the kingdom's sword saintly Yulo nodded. He ordered the guards to leave, then walked to the side with peace between man and nature. Inside is the princess palace. Without Her Highness' permission, even I can't let you in. If there is anything you want to say, just say it here. Peace between man and nature couldn't help but frown. Teacher, as the kingdom's sword saint, your status is honorable. Sword saintly Yulo waved his hand. The dragon clan has done me a great favor. I am here to guard the kingdom's princess. Consider it as repaying this favor. Don't think too much about it, just say what you want. If you stay too long, there might be some trouble. What trouble? Peace between man and nature couldn't help but be startled. Sword saintly Yulo just shook his head, looking like he didn't want to say more. Peace between man and nature could only quickly talk about the consequences of the matter. Sword saintly Yulo's expression was still calm at first, only thinking that this student wanted to get some pointers on the case from him, but when he found out that the deceased was from the same generation as him, the Exploding Hammer Saint, he couldn't help but be shocked. Yes, I have also heard about the Exploding Hammer Saint back then. Sword saintly Yuluo muttered. I only heard that he suddenly disappeared. This matter caused quite a stir back then, but as time passed, everyone forgot about it. I didn't think that the Exploding Hammer Saint, who dared to challenge the Dragon Clan would die tragically on the streets of the royal capital, and even his corpse was abandoned under the bridge. His ending was so miserable. The changes in life are not something you and I can imagine. Teacher said that Max once challenged the Dragon Clan of the continent? Peace between man and nature couldn't help but open her mouth. What was the result? Sword Saintly Yullo bitterly smiled. The result was naturally not good. Although the exploding hammer saint was also a first-level saint, there were no less than 20 saints in the Dragon Clan. How could he have succeeded? I heard that it was a crushing defeat. But speaking of which, the exploding hammer saint only disappeared not long after he failed to challenge the Dragon Clan. Some say that he hid his name because he was disheartened, while others say that he died from his injuries in the wilderness. Anyway, there are many different opinions. I didn't think that he actually came to the royal capital and became a small craftsman, hiding himself. Why did Max challenge the Dragon Clan back then? Peace between man and nature couldn't help but ask curiously. I'm not too sure about the specifics. Sword Saintly Yullo thought for a while and said, but after that battle, the Dragon Clan issued a kill order to pursue Li Yullo throughout the continent. The reason was that he stole a treasure of the Dragon Clan. I didn't think that after so many years, Max would still die in the end. Perhaps his death has something to do with the kill order from the Dragon Clan? It actually involved the Dragon Clan. Peace between man and nature's expression was grave. I didn't think that things would become more and more complicated. Perhaps those 3 little thieves really did have bad hands. What little thieves? Yullo subconsciously asked. Peace between man and nature wanted to explain, but at this moment, they heard shouts coming from the princess palace. It seemed that there was a fight. Someone's in the princess palace. Yuluo let out a cold snort, and the saint-level combatant leaped into the air and landed in the princess's palace. Peace between man and nature frowned and took advantage of the chaos to sneak into the palace. Soon, he saw a group of guards forming a circle, and in the circle, Sword Saintly Yuluo was fighting a man with a silver mask on his face. Peace between man and nature couldn't help but be shocked at this moment. The masked man fighting with his teacher was almost exactly the same as Ji Lian's uncle Zayart. In the middle of the battle, the silver-masked man was holding a 7-colored sword. Peace between man and nature's teacher, Sword Saintly Yullo, was somewhat unable to withstand the sharpness of the strange sword and was faintly at a disadvantage. Seeing this scene, peace between man and nature, who was quickly integrating all the information in his mind, couldn't help but mutter to himself, "It can't be. This sword can't be." Chapter 1840. The silver-masked man with the sword in his hand didn't seem to be at a disadvantage even when fighting sacred swordsman Li Yullo alone. Instead, he seemed to be even more valiant. While peace between man and nature was secretly impressed by the strength of the silver-masked man who had barged into the palace, she was about to lend a hand. However, at this moment, 2 figures simultaneously appeared on the roof of the princess' inner palace. Sacred swordsman Li Yullo wasn't the only one guarding the princess. There were 2 other sacred sages as well. The 2 sacred sages had both gathered powerful magic power at this moment. Seeing this, the silver-masked man urged the sword in his hand to slash out an enormous arc of light, then leapt into the air. The silver-masked man's clear voice could be heard. "Today's sword test is over. We'll fight again another day. Goodbye, everyone." Loud laughter filled the palace, but how could the 2 sacred sages let him go? 2 powerful magic attacks soared into the sky, instantly evaporating the clouds in the sky. When everything settled down, there was no trace of the silver-masked man. It was unknown whether he had died under the combined attacks of the 2 sacred sages, or whether he had seized the opportunity to escape. However, the palace was now a mess. Sacred swordsman Li Yullo landed on the ground, while peace between man and nature quickly walked up to him. "Master, just now. He's definitely a powerful sacred sages." Sacred swordsman Li Yullo's expression was solemn. I basically know all the sacred sages among the humans, but this person is very unfamiliar. Now that the palace is in chaos, it's inconvenient for you to stay here. Take this opportunity to leave the palace. If there's any news, I'll send someone to inform you." Peace between man and nature could only nod and quickly leave. After this, sacred swordsman Liulo returned to the princess' inner palace, only to see the two sacred sages together with the head maid Laura. Although her position in the palace was only the head maid of the princess, Laura's true identity was that of a dragon. Although she had the appearance of a beautiful young girl, her true form was that of a dragon of the continent. Compared to human sacred sages, she wasn't the least bit inferior. Sacred swordsman Liulo naturally couldn't underestimate her. "Mistress Laura, the two of you," Sword Saintly Yuluo quickly said. "I just fought with the intruder, but I couldn't figure out his background. Did you guys discover anything?" The two saint-level masters shook their heads. They had only unleashed a powerful attack at the end, and it couldn't even be considered an exchange of blows with an assassin, so they knew very little about it. "Anyone who dares to assassinate His Highness is an enemy of the Dragon Clan." At this time, Laura indifferently said, "The last saint who dared to provoke the Dragon Clan, what happened to him? The three of you should know. In the end, the dragons of the continent were more powerful. The reason why the kingdom of Elnis could dominate the entire continent was because of the support of the dragons of the continent. As the saints of the human kingdoms, they were more aware of the situation. Don't worry, Lady Laura. We'll be guarding the entrance of the palace for the next few days. We won't allow the same thing to happen a second time." One of the Saint Masters quickly said, "Was Princess Carol frightened?" "His Highness is still taking an afternoon nap and has not been frightened," Laura indifferently said. "But if that assassin had taken a few steps forward, I'm afraid he would have already woken up. If he annoyed His Highness, I'll find someone to punish him." Sword Saintly Yuluo and the two Saint Masters looked at each other calmly. At this time, a maid outside the palace came to report that King Amos was currently leading a large number of guards. Laura waved her hand and said, "Tell the king that the princess is fine, there's no need to worry. Since he didn't come when the incident happened, there's no need for him to come now. Tell him to pay attention to his own safety. Maybe the next one to be assassinated will be him." "Lord Sword Saint, why are you still here?" "Then let's go outside and take care of things." Sword Saintly Yuluo nodded. The three saints slowly withdrew from Princess Carol's palace. As soon as they stepped out of the door, one of the Saint Masters turned around to take a look, snorted coldly, and left with a flick of his sleeve. Sword Saintly Yuluo bitterly smiled, and looked at the other Saint Master beside him, and said helplessly, "You can talk to him better than I can. I'll have to trouble you to console him." The Saint Master who stayed behind coldly snorted and said, "If we didn't receive the kindness of the Dragon Clan, we wouldn't have to suffer like this today." A dignified monarch actually had to eat his own daughter's cold shoulder. It's said that the Emperor of Elnis, King Amos, is a gigolo of the Dragon Clan's princess. It's true. Although His Majesty used the Dragon Clan's power to seize the throne, he has never used the Dragon Clan's power in his many years of conquest. Sword Saintly Yuluo shook his head and said, "We can't erase his achievements." "So what?" "The kingdom of Elnis is still under the control of the Dragon Clan." The Saint Master shook his head. "Forget it, I'll get angry if I talk too much. By the way, Liuluo, I heard that your student came to the palace to look for you. Did something happen at the royal capital garrison?" Sword Saintly Yuluo said without batting an eyelid, "It's nothing. It's just a daily report. After all, I haven't been there for a long time. Even if you're not a human saint swordsman, as the head of the royal capital garrison, you have to be the bodyguard of that monster, that princess. It's really hard on you." The Saint Master patted Sword Saintly Yuluo's shoulder. "I'll go see that guy. He won't be angry for long. Don't worry." "Thank you." At this moment, a guard came to Sword Saintly Yuluo's side and said in a low voice, "Lordly Yuluo, His Majesty wants to see you." "I'll go right away." Sword Saintly Yuluo nodded. It wasn't outside Princess Carol's palace, but a courtyard not far from the princess's palace. When Sword Saintly Yuluo arrived, King Amos was sitting alone in the pavilion. "Your Majesty, I heard you fought with the assassin for the longest time. Can you tell who he is?" King Amos pointed at the stool beside him and motioned for Sword Saintly Yuluo to sit down. He was a human saint swordsman, but he was also a subject of the kingdom. There was some etiquette he didn't intend to overstep, so he just stood and said, "I can't tell." The assassin probably didn't intend to reveal his identity. Although he's strong, he's hiding a lot of his strength because of the sharpness of his sword. King Amos pondered for a moment, then said, "Who do you think might want to assassinate Carol?" Sword Saintly Yuluo pondered. Now that the kingdom dominates the continent and the princess's identity is so special, it's reasonable to say that only the remnants of destroyed kingdoms would dare to make a move against the princess. Then, it would be those who had a grudge against the dragons. Perhaps they would have such a motive. The Yamos king muttered to himself, "If Carol is assassinated, the dragons will definitely vent their anger on me. As long as there is even the slightest hint of the dragons wanting to abolish me, the seemingly powerful kingdom will have hidden dangers, right?" That's not necessarily true. Sword Saintly Yuluo thought for a moment, then said, "But it's inevitable that the dragons on the continent will be angry. The assassination of Princess Carol might just be an attempt to disrupt the current political situation. As for the specific goal, we don't know much, so it's hard to judge." King Amos sighed. "The national tournament is about to begin. I keep feeling that something will happen. Yuluo, I still need you to keep an eye on the palace guards." "I know what to do." Sword Saintly Yuluo thought for a moment, then suddenly said, "Your Majesty, there's one more thing. Just now, the Minister of Peace between man and nature came to me and told me about a murder that happened in the capital yesterday. Does your Majesty know who the victim is? Is it some big shot?" The Yamos king frowned. "For you to take the initiative to mention him to me, he shouldn't be a nobody, right? It's the explosive Hammer King, Max, who once charged into the dragon's territory and provoked them to hunt him down on the continent." King Amos couldn't help but open his mouth, then frowned slightly and said, "Tell me the details." Sword Saintly Yuluo began to speak slowly. "King's City, Alok's weapon shop." Ji Lian poked her head out of the window and then closed the window. "Not long ago, there was a sudden loud explosion in the sky above the palace, followed by a scene of flames soaring to the sky. Not long after, all the guards and soldiers of the royal capital began to move, going door to door in search of something. Looking at the situation, I'm afraid there won't be any peace today." Ji Lian returned to the table and sat down, looking at Boss Luo who was reading a book, then said, "I don't know who's so daring to enter the palace to assassinate. Could it be the remaining forces of the other countries?" Boss Luo was reading a book about the history of the continent. He bought it on the way back from Zehart's residence. Hearing this, Luoqiu asked curiously, "Remnants of the forces?" Ji Lian nodded and said, "Ever since King Amos took over the throne, the kingdom of Elnis has been at war for the past 10 years or so. King Amos is a great king. Except for some hidden tribes or small forces living in desolate lands, he has almost conquered the entire continent. You don't know, but over the past few years, the king's city has been hearing news of great victories every day. It's amazing. Only last year did things start to calm down and the war ended. But because of this, there are often remnants of the destroyed countries who sneak into the king's city to assassinate King Amos. After many years of war, he has almost conquered the entire world." Boss Luo closed the book and suddenly asked curiously, "With such a high-intensity war, can the kingdom of Elnis withstand it?" "That I don't know." Ji Lian shook her head and said, but I heard from my father that this kind of fighting method is called using battle to nurture battle. The places that the kingdom's iron cavalry passed through were basically plundered. Although this method can cultivate an invincible army, it will cause endless troubles. He said that this King Amos is a madman. At this moment, Max is right. King Amos is indeed a madman. Years of war, it seems that he has conquered the entire world. But in the entire continent, other than the king's city of Elnis, which seems to be unprecedentedly prosperous, there are corpses everywhere. The people are homeless, and the streets are full of starving people. Some places are like purgatory. This kind of king is not only a madman, but also a tyrant. A voice that did not belong to this place quietly rang out. It startled Jillian. Jillian immediately looked towards the source of the voice and saw a figure standing beside the shelf. A bright silver mask. Uncle Zayart! Jillian shouted in surprise and joy. She rushed forward. Uncle, where did you go? I went to your house to look for you, but I couldn't find you. Do you know that Father, I heard about what happened to Max. Zayart nodded and said in a low voice, I also didn't expect that yesterday would be the last time I see him. Jillian, please don't be too sad. I think Max doesn't want to see you in such a sad state. I will be strong. Jillian nodded, then wiped her nose and said, Look at me, I forgot to greet you. Sit down first, I will get you something to drink and eat. At this time, you probably haven't eaten anything, right? No need, I just came to see you. Mr. Zayart shook his head. I still have something to do, I have to leave soon. You are leaving again? Jillian was startled. Zayart nodded. There is a problem with my business outside, I have to rush over and take a look. I will be leaving the city soon. Jillian said, Then I will prepare some dry food for you to eat on the way. It will be quick, Uncle, wait for me, it will be quick. Then, without waiting for Zayart's response, Jillian hurriedly ran into the house. Here, only Boss Luo, Aurea and the silent Mr. Zayart were left. Jillian ran into the house quickly, but suddenly stopped. She didn't prepare anything, her face showed hesitation. What should I do now? Should I inform the Lord of Peace between man and nature? When she saw Zayart, she was pleasantly surprised, but she didn't immediately say that the Lord of Peace between man and nature found out that she bought the dagger used to kill her father. What if Uncle Zayart is innocent, and I inform the Lord of Peace between man and nature? It is tantamount to betraying Uncle. He is so good to me, but I suspect him. Jillian was in a dilemma. Should I confess to Uncle Zayart? But what if he is the murderer? Will it alert the enemy? She didn't believe that Zayart was the murderer of her father, but at the same time, she didn't want to let go of any chance to find the murderer. What should I do? Jillian smiled bitterly and muttered to herself, Dad, can you tell me? She painfully leaned against the corner of the wall, curling up her body. The surrounding lights were not lit, so it was dark. Speaking of which, we seem to have met yesterday. Zayart finally spoke first. We have indeed met. Boss Luo smiled and nodded. During this time, I am very grateful to you for accompanying Jillian. Zayart said seriously, This child has a deep relationship with Max. Although he seems to be much better now, I am afraid that when he is alone, he will hide and cry silently. Some people live, some people die. Boss Luo said casually, Everyone will experience the death of a loved one, the pain may only be temporary. You are quite open-minded. Zayart nodded. It seems that you are someone who has been through this. Boss Luo didn't say anything. At this moment, Zayart suddenly shook his hand, and a 7-colored treasure sword floated in his palm. He said indifferently, This sword belongs to you, right? Boss Luo said calmly, It doesn't belong to me, this is my sword. As he said this, Boss Luo put the luxurious sword he bought at the small stall under the bridge on the table. Zayart subconsciously frowned. He originally had some plans in his heart, but he didn't expect that the other side would do this kind of thing. He didn't expect this. Zayart didn't say anything, but in the end, he put away the sword. With a wave of his hand, the sword disappeared. This was the ability of a professional. He looked deeply at Boss Luo and was about to say something. But Luochu said at this time, "Ji Lian, he should be in a dilemma now. What do you want to say?" Zayart frowned. Boss Luo said casually, "During the day, the guards found the weapon that killed Mr. Max. You bought it from another weapon shop. It was a one-hit kill, there were no scars of fighting. The murderer probably didn't take advantage of Mr. Max's unpreparedness to suddenly attack. It's someone he already knows, and it's very likely to be a very close friend." "Understood. You suspect that I am the murderer, right?" Zayart said indifferently. Boss Luo said to himself, "The guards should have sent someone to watch this place in the dark, waiting for you to appear. Ji Lian, he probably doesn't know whether he should inform the guards or not." "Why are you telling me this?" Zayart narrowed his eyes. "Aren't you afraid that I'll suddenly make things difficult, or just leave?" Boss Luo smiled and said, "Nothing, I just want to see what Ji Lian will do, and I also want to know how Mr. Zayart will react to Ji Lian's actions after knowing the whole story." "This is," Zayart said slowly, "only the devil who plays with people's hearts would like to do something like this. Since you want to know how I will react, then I will fulfill your wish." Zayart's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness as he said this. But at this time, Ji Lian had already walked out with a luggage bag, and said quickly, "Uncle, I prepared some food and drinks for you." "Yes, what happened?" Ji Lian felt that the atmosphere here was a bit strange. Chapter 1841. The atmosphere was a bit anxious. Ji Lian had never seen Uncle Zayart's gaze. It was like the gaze of those bad adventurers who came to the weapon shop to buy weapons. The gaze of those whose hands were stained with blood. "It's nothing." Zayart shook his head. "Have you prepared the things?" Ji Lian had to nod, put the bag on the table, and then took out a bottle of wine. "This wine." Zayart frowned subconsciously. Ji Lian stroked the bottle and said softly, "Uncle brought this back for Dad once. At that time, he only drank half of the bottle. I know Dad hid it under the bed and was reluctant to drink it. Now, he's gone, so it's useless to keep it. Uncle, it was brought here, and now it's returned to its rightful owner. You know, I don't like to drink." "You're so considerate." Zayart was silent for a while, and then patted Ji Lian's shoulder. "When I'm done with the things outside, I'll come back to the King's City to see you, Uncle." At this moment, Ji Lian raised his head. "Let me drink with you. Take it as a farewell, or take it as a remembrance of Dad. Dad can't taste this wine anymore. I think I want to drink it on his behalf." "Okay." Zayart nodded. "It's rare for you to have this." Ji Lian quickly took the cups. 3 cups, and then poured some wine into each cup, and gave it to Zayart and Boss Luo. "I also have one?" Boss Luo asked curiously. "I can't let you watch us drink." Ji Lian showed a wry smile. "Thank you." Boss Luo smiled. They clinked their cups, but before they were about to drink, Ji Lian suddenly looked at Mr. Zayart and asked, "Uncle Zayart, yesterday afternoon, after you left the weapon shop, where did you go? Didn't you go home?" Zayart paused. "I didn't go back. This time I came back because of business. After I met you, I remembered to buy some goods. Speaking of which, you can go to my place when you have time. Anyway, you always have the key." Ji Lian nodded, and then said, "I heard from the guards that someone saw you appear near the place where Dad was killed last night. What do you want to say?" Zayart frowned, his voice slightly heavy. Ji Lian sighed and said sorrowfully, "I was thinking, if only I could have met you before Old Father was killed. That way, Old Father might not have been killed. You and Old Father had such a good relationship, but Old Father was killed near you. Uncle, don't be sad." Zayart nodded his head silently. Immediately, he finished half a cup of wine in one gulp and took his bag. "I'm going to leave the city soon. During this time, take good care of yourself. If there's anything, wait for me to come back." As he spoke, this traveling merchant, Mr. Zayart, prepared to open the door and leave. But just as he was about to leave, he suddenly stopped, turned around and said, "Jillian, the next time I come back, I'll bring you some new and interesting things." Smile. Uncle. Jillian walked out. At this time, Zehart's body suddenly became unstable. He shook his head hard, but felt that the world was spinning. He suddenly lost his center of gravity and fell to the ground. Seeing this, Jillian dragged Zayart back into the weapons shop. Boss Luo thoughtfully looked at the wine on the table. "Is there something in this wine?" Jillian faintly said, "It's a kind of ore powder. Old father usually used it as an auxiliary agent when forging weapons. If people accidentally eat it, they will faint and their body will be paralyzed for a short time. But don't worry, there's no such thing in your cup." "So, you're planning to hand Mr. Zayart over to the guards?" "I don't know." Jillian shook his head. "I haven't thought about it. But I can't let Uncle leave now. After all, he's a big suspect. I can only think of this method for now. After Uncle wakes up, he will probably hate me to death." As he said this, Jillian carried Zayart on his back. "Even if you imprison him, it's not a solution," Luochu said from the side. "Then what can I do?" Jillian suddenly became emotional. "Hand him over to the guards personally? If Uncle is innocent, then how can I forgive myself? Let him go? But if he really is, I'll be sorry to old father. If he tells you personally that he has nothing to do with this matter," Luochu curiously asked, "will you choose to believe him? Remember, he can also be lying." Jillian's hands that were binding Zayart with iron chains suddenly paused. He faintly said, "Then tell me, if you were me, what would you do? If you can't give me an answer, then please don't give me any more hypothetical comments about my actions." Boss Luo nodded and said apologetically, "Indeed, a bystander should have the self-awareness of a bystander." He began to be silent and no longer took the initiative to ask Jillian any questions, until Jillian completely bound Zayart with iron chains. "Sorry, my tone just now was a bit harsh." Jillian sighed and came to Luochu's side at this time. I just can't control myself." Boss Luo just said with gentle eyes, "At your age, it's already very good. At least, it's better than me before." "Mr. Luo, you also." Jillian subconsciously raised his head. "Are you hungry?" Boss Luo smiled and said, "I'll go get something to eat." "Don't look at me like this, I still have some experience in cooking. There should be some dry bread in the kitchen, don't bother too much." Jillian had to shake his head. Boss Luo said casually, "My father said, no matter how bad tomorrow is, we still have to live. Live a better life, then we have the motivation to face tomorrow's bad." Jillian opened his mouth and then smiled bitterly. "There should be bacon and vegetables in the kitchen. Add an egg." "Forget it, let me do it, after all, you're the guest." As he spoke, he looked back at the unconscious Zayart. Jillian took a deep breath, pulled himself together, and quickly climbed out of the cellar. Boss Luo also looked at Mr. Zayart casually and planned to climb out of the cellar. At this time, a small head appeared at the entrance of the cellar. It was Araya in white clothes. The girl's beautiful hair was now hanging down, strand by strand, without a trace of mess. "What's the matter?" Luochu asked with a slight smile. Araya in white clothes took the initiative to stretch out her hand. "My clothes are torn." Boss Luo climbed out of the cellar at once and asked curiously, "Torn? Where is it torn?" Araya turned around at this time. It was indeed torn, from the back of the waist. The clothes were torn all the way to the buttock. "I'm curious, how did you tear it?" Boss Luo shook his head, took off his coat and put it on her. Araya shook her head. "I don't know, it's just a tear." "Do you want to sew it or replace it with a new one?" Boss Luo smiled and asked. "Brother, what do you think?" Araya thought for a moment and asked blankly. "Then sew it." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "Normally, people will choose to sew it." "Why?" Araya was puzzled and asked. Boss Luo said casually, because they believe that damaged things can be repaired. Not just clothes but everything. Is that so? Araya shook her head. Not all things can be repaired. The things that are beyond repair will not be repaired again, unless time is turned back. Turning back time is too exaggerated. Boss Luo patted Araya's head lightly and chuckled. They just hope. Araya shook her head, then pulled Boss Luo's sleeve and said softly, "The guy in the cellar smells like a dragon." Really? Boss Luo nodded. Araya continued, "The bridge smells like a dragon too." Got it. Boss Luo nodded. Let's sew the clothes first. On the street, the guards were still searching from house to house. Even peace between man and nature's car was stopped several times. Suddenly, a figure got into peace between man and nature's car. What's the matter? Peace between man and nature asked directly. The subordinate who got into the car quickly said, "Sir, the matter you asked me to go back to the garrison division this afternoon to ask the astrologer to check on the bridge. There is a result. This is the report." He sent a document to peace between man and nature. Peace between man and nature opened the document and frowned. "It's not a high-level monster, but a dragon's aura, sir," the subordinate said with a serious expression. "As far as I know, there are only 2 people in the king's city who can have a dragon's aura. One is the head maid of the palace, Laura, and the other is, why don't you say it?" Peace between man and nature looked at the subordinate, who wanted to say something but stopped. The subordinate could only bite the bullet and say, "Sir, I don't need to say anything about the other person. You must know, the whole country knows." Peace between man and nature snorted and put the document away, not saying anything. The subordinate didn't dare to make any noise at this time, but from his many years of experience, he felt that he was involved in a terrible whirlpool. This whirlpool involved the dragons of the continent. Time passed little by little. Peace between man and nature suddenly asked, "Is there any movement at Locke's arms shop? Did Zayart appear?" The subordinate said, "Our spies have been stationed there all this time, and haven't found anything yet. As for the people you asked us to monitor, they haven't left the shop since this afternoon. Sir, do you think that the suspect, Zayart, will really go to the shop? If he is the murderer, he should be far away by now. Change the route." Peace between man and nature suddenly said, "Go to Locke's arms shop." The subordinate could only instruct the driver in charge of driving the car. Not long after, the carriage from the garrison division arrived at Locke's arms shop. Peace between man and nature ordered people to wait outside, then knocked on the door and walked into the shop. When he saw the second chief of the garrison division again today, Jilian's expression couldn't help but change slightly. They had just prepared a table of sumptuous dinner. "Sir, why are you here?" Jilian calmed down and asked quietly. "What's the good news?" Peace between man and nature glanced at this time, and asked seemingly casually, "Usually, people will only eat so well during festivals." Jilian looked at Mr. Luo, who was as calm as water, and said seriously, "I think, instead of not eating anything because of the pain and starving himself, it's better to eat well so that he will have more strength to face the future." "Good idea." Peace between man and nature nodded, then immediately sat down, looked at Boss Luo and smiled casually. "This person taught you, right? How did you know?" Jilian closed his mouth and then said, "Sir, peace between man and nature, do you want to eat with us? I'll bring you the blood utensils." "Okay." Peace between man and nature nodded. "Anyway, I'm hungry. I've been busy all day and haven't eaten anything. Thank you." "Right away." Jilian nodded and had to turn around to get the utensils. Peace between man and nature didn't hold back at this time, and directly reached out to steal the food on the plate to eat. As he ate, he said casually, "Today, a very bad assassination happened in the palace, causing a storm in the capital. I remember you said that you don't know where you lost your identification. If there's nothing going on these few days, you should be careful." Peace between man and nature, Mr. Luo, as the second chief of the guards in the capital. Let me go like this, is it okay? Boss Luo put down the utensils used for eating. Peace between man and nature stole a bit of food from every plate. There's nothing wrong with it. Peace between man and nature chuckled and said, catching the assassin is temporarily the job of the palace guards. This matter is not under the control of the guards. Sir, you came so late, is it because of the discovery of the murder case? Boss Luo suddenly asked. Sigh, there's no clue. Peace between man and nature shrugged. I can only stroll around, passing by this place, so I came to take a look. I was thinking, maybe you will have some new discoveries. At this time, Ji Lian took the utensils back and put them in front of peace between man and nature. No need. Peace between man and nature said indifferently, I'm full, I won't disturb you if there's nothing else. Oh, by the way, Zayart didn't come to find you today, right? No. Ji Lian answered quickly, not avoiding peace between man and nature's gaze at this time. I see. Peace between man and nature's gaze turned, seemingly nodding casually, but at this time, suddenly frowned. There seems to be a sound from below. At this time, Ji Lian's gaze couldn't help but change slightly. Just now there was a sound, and the source seemed to be in the cellar. Maybe it's rats. Ji Lian quickly said, rats often steal things to eat in the cellar. After a batch of them are poisoned to death, another batch comes, it's very annoying. I'm good at catching rats. Peace between man and nature smiled at this time, let me help you. After saying this, peace between man and nature did not wait for Ji Lian to respond, she took her sword and directly rushed into the house. Ji Lian's expression changed dramatically, she called out again and quickly chased after her. But this guard division's second-in-command was very fast. When Ji Lian chased to the cellar, peace between man and nature had already jumped in. Ji Lian had to bite the bullet and also climb into the cellar. But at this time in the cellar, there was no trace of Uncle Zayart. Ji Lian looked at the broken chain on the ground and subconsciously relaxed, but she did not know how Uncle Zayart broke it. He actually had such ability. I already said, it's just some rats. Ji Lian walked to the side at this time, pointed at a small hole that was sealed with a wooden board and said, they should have crawled away. Well, it's good that you're fine. Peace between man and nature smiled and was about to leave, but before leaving, he went to a corner and casually used his sword to lift up a piece of canvas covering the corner. What was covered with the canvas was only some charcoal. Sir, what are you doing? Ji Lian frowned at this time and said, I can't be hiding something here, right? It's okay, I'm just curious. Peace between man and nature shrugged. Well, I won't disturb you. Well, let's finish looking here. As he spoke, he used his long sword to pry open another piece of canvas. What's this? But this time, under the canvas, there was actually an extraordinary sword embedded with gems. In addition, there was also a silver mask. At this time, Ji Lian was also shocked by the things in front of her. It seems that I have to work overtime tonight. Peace between man and nature narrowed his eyes at this time and pointed his sword at lightning speed. Mr. Ji Lian, are you interested in going back to the guards division with me? I now suspect that you have something to do with the assassination this afternoon. Chapter 1842. The style of the interrogation room in Elnis' Royal Guard Division was very different from the interrogation rooms in the modern world, but it was not to the extent where there were torture instruments hanging everywhere. In the stone room, there were some strange symbols carved on the walls. In addition to peace between man and nature, there were a few scribes on the side who were responsible for recording all the questions and answers. Then, for the first time in his life, Boss Luo put on something called a shackle. It was not heavy, but it was made of special materials that could suppress the abilities of professionals. Lastly, it was not dark here, and the light was still soft. But there was no legendary coffee. Overall, the experience was not bad. This was a separate interrogation. Ji Lian should be in the interrogation room next door. As for Araya, he was currently being looked after by a female guard. Peace between man and nature said so. These are the things found in the cellar: the mask and the sword. Peace between man and nature had been silent for a long time. During this time, he just kept looking at Luochio, who was in the interrogation room. Do you know what these things mean? I hope you can explain, Boss Luo said calmly. Then, he looked at the stained cup on the table and gave up the idea of drinking water. Let's not talk about Max's murder. Peace between man and nature picked up the sword on the table that was found in the cellar and pulled it out. Suddenly, there was a flash of light. Even he could not help but be frightened by the power that was faintly emitted by the sword. Let's talk about the assassination that happened in the palace during the day. Coincidentally, I was at the scene. At this moment, he was wearing this mask and holding this sword. He fought with the palace guards and then disappeared. Even if we don't know this assassin, we can't get rid of the crime of hiding an assassin. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "It should be like this. This is only the garrison division." The Minister of Peace between man and nature said indifferently, "What we care about is the truth of the matter. We will let innocent people go. But if this is the prison of the Imperial Guards, do you know what it means to rather kill 100 innocent people than to let one suspect go?" "Sir, are you planning to hand me over to the Imperial Guards?" Boss Luo asked curiously. "That's not right. Perhaps the guards are already on their way here. Even if you didn't mention it yourself, it's impossible that the guards didn't report it privately." The Minister of Peace between man and nature narrowed her eyes. "You'd better tell the truth. Then, maybe you'll still have a chance to live after the guards take you away. Time is running out. I think you're a smart person. Let's get straight to the point." "Please go ahead, sir." Boss Luo nodded slightly. "This guy's mental fortitude is really good." The Director of Peace between man and nature muttered to himself. He then nodded and said, "Where did these two things come from?" "It should be left behind by Mr. Zayart," Boss Luo said directly. "Zayart." The Director of Peace between man and nature frowned. "He really went to the weapon shop. Why didn't he inform me immediately?" "I think Sir should ask Mr. Ji Lian about this question," Boss Luo said casually. "This should be done by Mr. Ji Lian. After all, Sir only asked Mr. Ji Lian to report it to you." The Director of Peace between man and nature sneered and suddenly said, "You seem to be very used to interrogation. You know how to avoid the important and dwell on the trivial. Have you been interrogated often before?" "I have more time to chat with others." Boss Luo smiled slightly. The Director of Peace between man and nature said indifferently, "Why did Zayart leave these things behind? Let's not talk about the mask first. Maybe it was to change his clothes. But this sword. This is a really good sword. I don't think anyone would be willing to throw it away so casually. Maybe Mr. Zayart left in a hurry and really forgot about it. Or maybe it was inconvenient for him to move around with this sword, so he left it behind and came back to get it later. I heard that this sword was also covered with a canvas. In other words, it was meant to be hidden?" The Director of Peace between man and nature smiled and said, "There should be other possibilities, right?" He stood up and walked behind Boss Luo. Suddenly, he bent down and whispered in Boss Luo's ear, "For example, leaving these valuable things behind will give people the illusion that he has left but will definitely come back to take them. But in fact, Zayart didn't leave. Instead, he has always been in the weapon shop, and he is also among the people I brought back." Boss Luo said in surprise, "Sir, do you think Mr. Ji Lian is Zayart?" The Director of Peace between man and nature suddenly said, "Why not you? Why me?" Boss Luo blinked and said curiously, "According to Mr. Ji Lian, Mr. Zayart and Mr. Max were good friends for decades. Mr. Ji Lian even watched Mr. Ji Lian grow up." "I have never seen this Zayart," the Director of Peace between man and nature said indifferently. There is no such person in the registered resident information of the king's city. We have checked all the chambers of commerce, but no one knows the identity of the traveling merchant Zayart. Maybe there really is such a person, but the only person who has seen him is the dead Max Julien. Boss Luo said unhurriedly, I have also seen Mr. Zayart on the afternoon of Mr. Max's death. Mr. Julien can testify for me. It could also be fake. The director of peace between man and nature shook his head. Who knows? Sir, you seem to have some ideas, Boss Luo suddenly said. The director of peace between man and nature said, let's assume that there is no such person as Zayart. He is just a fictional person because of some special purpose. What purpose? For example, an assassination. The director of peace between man and nature smiled faintly and quickly walked to his seat. Then he picked up a flower book from his seat and slapped it in front of Boss Luo. We found a mark like this on Julien's body. It is a tattoo. Boss Luo looked down at the picture on the book. This picture is very special. The director of peace between man and nature said in a deep voice, this is a bloodline mark that only the royal blood of the kingdom Akkadias, which was destroyed by our country 19 years ago. This mark is born with it and cannot be forged. It will appear automatically when one is agitated. We have never found this, but when we were interrogating Julien, he was slightly agitated and our interrogators found it. Then, the director of peace between man and nature sneered. This bloodline mark is enough to prove that Julien is a descendant of the royal family of the destroyed kingdom Akkadias. So, in order to take revenge, you planned this with your own hands. You fabricated a person called Zayart with the purpose of entering the palace to assassinate. For this purpose, you even cruelly killed Max. In order to complete your lie, in order to make us believe that Zayart really exists. Then, you can use your current identity to continue hiding in the king's city and wait for an opportunity to act. Really? Boss Luo opened his mouth. You have a rich imagination. You admit it, right? Then why do we still put the important masks and weapons in places where they can be found? Boss Luo shook his head and said, isn't it better to hide in other places? Staying outside is better than being brought to the guards division. This is where you are smart. The director of peace between man and nature said indifferently, taking revenge on the kingdom is such a big thing. I don't believe that there are only 2 of you. You must have other accomplices. If my guess is correct, perhaps another Zayart will appear soon. At that time, you will be able to walk out of our suspicious line of sight. As victims, you will be much safer. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, Sir, didn't you say at the beginning that you want to help us and don't want us to be mistakenly killed by the guards? Why did you suddenly have this idea now? I couldn't hold back my train of thought. The director of peace between man and nature shrugged and smiled. The more you talk, the more it seems to be the case. So, are you going to tell me that this is how it is? He narrowed his eyes and looked straight into Boss Luo's eyes. Boss Luo said indifferently, then let's see if Zayart will appear again. You are not afraid that he will be sent to the guards? The director of peace between man and nature said expressionlessly. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, I guess the guards must have sent someone to privately report the information, but it is more likely that this person has already been stopped on the way. Perhaps it is your subordinate? Why should I do that? The director of peace between man and nature said indifferently, the suspect of the assassination of the palace is a serious criminal. Privately detaining him is not a good crime. Boss Luo blinked and said, because this is how it is in TV dramas. TV dramas? What is that? The director of peace between man and nature couldn't help but be stunned. Boss Luo smiled and said, something like a story or a stage play. The director of peace between man and nature approached Boss Luo. The 2 of them were only 2 fingers apart. He said expressionlessly, is it that funny? Boss Luo smiled slightly. The director of peace between man and nature suddenly said in a deep voice, someone, send him to prison, Treat this innocent victim with good food and drinks. The director of peace between man and nature sat on the chair in the interrogation room rather inelegantly. His fingers lightly tapped his forehead. The recorder couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Sir, why don't you use torture? These criminals are all very eloquent. Even if we can't get anything out of them, it is good to let them suffer a little." The director of peace between man and nature grabbed the teacup and threw it out. He snorted and said, "Who am I, the director of peace between man and nature? If I have to rely on heavy punishment to solve a case, where will I put my face if word gets out? What's wrong with using torture to deal with criminals?" The recorder's eyes were full of question marks. Then, do we really have to treat them with good food and drinks? The recorder could only ask tentatively. The director of peace between man and nature said indifferently, "We have to use different methods to deal with different people. Of course, heavy punishment is the most effective way to deal with those low-class thieves. But this person is the most difficult kind to deal with. Only by breaking down his inner defense lines psychologically can we really get something out of him. Otherwise, under the heavy punishment, if he spouts a bunch of nonsense, we'll only be running around and wasting the resources of the guards division. Why don't we try using mental attack?" The recorder suggested. "Directly destroy his spirit, then he can say anything. Mental attack can easily completely destroy his will. If he becomes a living dead, then the loss will outweigh the gain." The director of peace between man and nature shook his head. "Unless it is absolutely necessary, don't act recklessly. But we can't hide it from the guards for long." The recorder shook his head. "Sir, I don't want to say this, but the assassin is such a big matter, the guards division doesn't need to intervene, right? Just directly hand it over to the guards. Why do you have to get involved in this muddy water? Besides, Gillian is a descendant of the royal family of Acadias. Hiding the remnants of the royal family of another country is a bigger crime, sir. I have my own plans." The director of peace between man and nature waved his hand. "You can go. Keep a tight lid on this. If anyone leaks it out, don't blame me for not caring about our old friendship. This is a big matter, I will report it to my teacher." "Yes." The recorder nodded. The teacher of peace between man and nature was the kingdom's sword saint, Liulo, who was also the head of the guards division. Perhaps only the sword saint could handle this matter. He let out a slight sigh of relief and slowly retreated. In the interrogation room, the director of peace between man and nature once again picked up the sword that he had found. He pulled it out, and a stream of light suddenly shone in the interrogation room. He jumped out with the sword and quickly performed a few moves in the interrogation room. In the end, he slashed the wall with the sword and directly cut the special engraving on the wall, leaving a deep sword mark on the wall. "This sword, is it really one of the 3 divine weapons?" The director of peace between man and nature lowered his head and said nothing. He narrowed his eyes and looked at his arm. At this time, he slowly pulled up his sleeve and saw a blood-red coat of arms, which had already appeared at this time. "It has been a day and a night." In the prison, the castle trio squatted in 3 corners of the same cell. This was what Dr. Gores said. "Yes, it has been a day and a night, but we are still here." The maid repeated the doctor's words and then added, "We have not eaten for a day and a night. Our professional ability is sealed. If we can't even get the most basic physical strength, we are likely to be the first batch of servants to starve to death." "See, Sneeve, what are you eating?" Dr. Gores suddenly said at this time. He saw that Sneeve in the corner had a short tail in his mouth at this time. Hearing this, Sneeve sneered and spread out his palm. At this time, there was half of a lizard's body in his palm. "Do you want it? Tastes good, crunch crunch." "Bah!" Dr. Gores snorted and was about to speak, but he heard the door of the cell open at this time and saw a jailer escorting someone in. Dr. Gores looked carefully and saw the appearance of the person who was escorted in, and his eyes widened. You come over, see who I see? The maid and Sneeve frowned at the same time and got up and walked over. In the corridor outside the cell, a figure walked slowly, then stopped in front of them and was sent to the opposite cell. Until the jailers left, Dr. Gores hurriedly grabbed the iron bars of the cell and exclaimed in disbelief, Sir, Captain, how did you get caught by them? What a coincidence, Mr. Gores, I didn't expect to meet you here. Boss Luo in the opposite cell was quite surprised at this time. I seem to be involved in some cases by accident. Dr. Jurl's eyes turned black at once. It's over, even you've been caught. It's over. Who can save us like this? Don't worry. Boss Luo comforted at this time. We have not been convicted yet, we have to believe in fairness and justice. What kind of fairness and justice are you talking about? We're all illegal residents, we don't have any proof of identity, okay? Sir Captain, you must have a plan, right? Dr. Gores said at this time. I know you must have a way. Come, be good. Just like before, take out some items from your treasure bag, such as the invisibility scroll or the Heart of War god gems, anything will do. I don't think I can take them out now. Boss Luo raised his hand and shook the shackles, making clanking sounds. What do I need you for? Of course, this. Dr. Gores didn't say it out loud. Suddenly, Dr. Gores grabbed Sneeve's hand and took the remaining half of the reptile's body from his palm, stuffing it directly into his mouth. Chapter 1843. Boss Luo did not see Jillian. At least, Jillian had not appeared since he was brought to this cell. She might be imprisoned somewhere else, or she might still be under interrogation. According to the available information, there were only these possibilities. Boss Luo tore a small piece of white bread with his hand and slowly put it into his mouth. He seemed to be thinking about something and was lost in thought. However, the gaze from the opposite cell interrupted Boss Luo's thoughts. Why is your food so good? Gore's voice sounded. It came from the opposite cell, as if the voice had traveled across the sea. It sounded very far away. This was indeed the best food that the prison wardens could provide at the last minute. It was at the request of the Garrison Guard Division. Do you want to eat? Luochu reached out and picked up 2 pieces of white bread, ready to throw it over. They were now servants, and their bodies were completely different from their previous bodies. As vampires for many years, Gores and Tina had forgotten the taste of human food. They were busy fighting and killing along the way, so they had little time to sit down and eat good food. Even if they did, it was in the process of discussing something, so it was difficult to find the beauty of food. They would be hungry. Because of the high consumption of the body of professionals, their hunger would be far more intense than that of ordinary people. Although they could endure it, it was difficult to endure. When did they ever suffer from hunger? Not even a day, let alone a day and a night without food and water. Oh, Dr. Gores and Sneeve ate a small reptile. This made Dr. Gores feel even more uncomfortable. His stomach churned as if he was a vampire who drank expired blood. He felt that his spirit was greatly damaged. We need to replenish our strength to be able to cope with the next situation. So Dr. Gores said sternly, Look at our poor Sneeve, how hungry is he? My God, the hunger has tortured him to the point that he wants to reach out to the insects in the cell. Snake opened his mouth and pointed at himself in shock. Then, he snorted coldly. At this moment, bread was tossed over from the opposite cell, as well as a few pieces of meat made from soy sauce. Thank God, you deserve my faith. The doctor was spouting nonsense at this time, probably because in the world of chessboard, even the real God couldn't hear his not-so-sincere prayers. It smells so good. It smelled so good. Compared to the taste of insects, it was many times better. Sneeve felt that he was still a human, so he couldn't deny his human instinct. The trio in the castle ate silently with complicated feelings. They were prisoners, yet they were given food. Let's break out of prison. Finally, Dr. Gores stood up abruptly and said, "This is what we should be doing." As he spoke, he threw the remaining crumbs of bread onto the ground, just like the cup that was thrown during the uprising, but it fell silently to the ground. Prison break? Boss Luo's voice came from the opposite cell. It didn't travel across the ocean, but it sounded like it was right next to their ears. You don't agree? Dr. Gores frowned. Do you really believe in the so-called *T justice? Boss Luo shook his head. I'm thinking, I haven't tried to break out of prison before. It sounds good. Then, Mr. Gores, do you already have a plan? He indicated that he didn't, but it wasn't too late to think about it now, so he pondered. Boss Luo smiled and was about to drink something, but he found that there was no black tea among the food that he was used to drinking, so he gave up the idea. Not much time had passed in the outside world of chessboard. Probably not even a night had passed. But it had been a long time, especially when he accompanied the first day Mayfair through 1,000 yesterdays. The boss missed the black tea made by his servant girl. Let's speed up the progress of the game, he muttered. What did you say? Dr. Gores suddenly pricked up his ears. He clearly heard the muttering. Nothing, Boss Luo said casually. I'm just thinking that the prison of the Guards Division seems to have been built for a long time, and it must have imprisoned countless prisoners in the past. I don't know if there were any prisoners who successfully broke out of prison. For example, they used decades to secretly dig a tunnel without telling the jailers, or something like that. As he spoke, Boss Luo really started to search in his cell, quietly looking for the walls and the floor. He wouldn't be traumatized, right? Gores subconsciously looked at Tina, who was standing beside him, and asked hesitantly. Miss Maid shook her head blankly. But at this moment, Sneeve's face suddenly changed slightly, and directly made a shushing gesture. Sure, there's movement. It wasn't the movement of the jailers, but a strange movement from the opposite cell. Dr. Gores suddenly opened his eyes wide. God! The great vampire ancestor above. What did he see? He actually saw the captain of his servant team, at this time, really overturned a floor. It was a floor, it was really a floor. A square. Hey, there really is. Boss Luo said at this time, there seems to be a secret passage here, look. Dr. Gores, What? He's gone? Peace between man and nature, who was working overtime in his office, frowned at this time. When did this happen? Why did he disappear? The subordinate who was sweating at this time said with a trembling voice, it should have happened after the meal was delivered, and before the first patrol at night. In the cell where the prisoners were held, we found a secret passage. It looked very old. I'm afraid it was dug by former prisoners. The prison is inspected and repaired every month, and you're telling me that prisoners dug an escape tunnel in the past? How long ago was this? 3 days ago, 7 days ago, or 10 days ago? Can you dig it for me to see? And when have we ever lost a prisoner in the prison of the Garrison Division? Bullshit. Sir, it's true. The subordinate hurriedly knelt on the ground. If you don't believe me, you can go and see for yourself. Of course I'll go. Peace between man and nature snorted, stood up directly and went straight out. He didn't even wear shoes. In front of the cell where the accident happened, Peace between man and nature, who was barefooted, looked at the jailers who were busy back and forth in the cell expressionlessly, and gradually became impatient. He had already seen the escape tunnel in the cell. It was indeed old, and definitely not something that could be dug recently. As for the exit of the tunnel, it was in a rockery outside the cell, a total distance of about 13 meters. But what made peace between man and nature strange was that Luocchio could have easily left by himself, but he actually turned back after taking out the tunnel. After knocking out a jailer, he also released the 3 little thieves from the scene of Max's murder. Could it be that they knew each other, or that they were actually accomplices? At this moment, a subordinate carrying a lamp quickly walked in front of peace between man and nature, trembling in fear. If you don't give me a satisfactory answer, pack your bags and get out of here, and go back to the countryside to farm. Sir, it's clear," the subordinate said in fear and trepidation. "It turns out that the prison really did lose a prisoner 10 years ago. That prisoner was the nephew of the jailer who was in charge of the prison at that time, so the two of them plotted to escape from the prison. At that time, the prisoner disappeared, and they lied that the prisoner died of illness. Later, they bribed the medical officer, saying that there was a plague after the prisoner died, so they burned the body overnight and destroyed the evidence." "What about the jailer who was in charge of the prisoner?" "He just committed suicide." The subordinate swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said nervously, "I'm afraid that he was exposed, and because he was afraid, he peace between man and nature was silent, and walked back and forth with his hands behind his back. 10 years, more than 10 years, and this secret passage is still there?" The subordinate said, I'm afraid that this guy was afraid that he would be imprisoned one day, so he left it for himself to escape? Or, as long as he met the right person, he could use it to make a huge profit?" "Humph. Peace between man and nature," snorted coldly. "That craftsman who was in charge of the monthly maintenance is also guilty. Bring him back for interrogation immediately." "Yes, sir." The subordinate took 2 steps back, and then quickly waved his hand, indicating that the people below him should go and arrest the craftsman. How could he have met with this? A secret passage for 10 years. Peace between man and nature looked at the rockery outside the prison cell at the exit of the secret passage, and couldn't help but frown. No one can have such luck. "Sir, what should we do now? The person we lost is a major suspect who was involved in the assassination of the palace. If this is leaked out, then don't go back to the countryside to farm. Prepare to be exiled." "Peace between man and nature," snorted coldly. Immediately, peace between man and nature frowned and said in a low voice, "The shackles on their hands are specially made. Without a key, they can't be opened in a short period of time. As long as they can't use their powers, even if they escape from the guards division, they shouldn't have gone far. I'll send someone to search immediately." The subordinate quickly responded. "Wait." Peace between man and nature suddenly shouted, and then squinted at the subordinate and said, "Remember, the guards division has never arrested any suspects, but the guards division has found a major suspect in the assassination case. Immediately notify the Imperial Guards, and issue a warrant for the arrest. The guards division will be mobilized, and together with the Imperial Guards, they will hunt for the culprit in the entire city." The entire garrison division was in a state of chaos. Peace between man and nature's face was so gloomy that it could frighten people. When she returned to her office, she was informed that the little girl in white, who was brought back from Locke's arms shop, had mysteriously disappeared. However, Julien was still there. After the interrogation, peace between man and nature ordered people to keep Julien somewhere else. Peace between man and nature stroked the sword that she had confiscated, and became more and more confused. "If you want to clear your name, why did you run away? Could it be that something happened?" They smelled the scent of freedom, as if they had been redeemed. All that was left was a drizzle to wash them away. But the moonlight was just right. "So we're out now? So simple?" Dr. Gores was still suspicious of what was happening at this moment. Was that the Guards Division prison, which was known as the Iron Fortress? "Doctor, I think it's too early for us to be happy," Tina said suddenly. "Indeed." Dr. Gores nodded, and looked at the shackles on his body. The only flaw was that they didn't find the key to open the shackles that were used to imprison professionals. That kind of thing should be stored in a special place, and it couldn't be casually held by the jailers. "Not this," Miss Maid said faintly. "I'm talking about, our captain disappeared again." "Oh? What? Boss Luo really disappeared? They couldn't find any trace of him. The 3 people in the castle didn't even know when their captain disappeared. What should we do now?" Miss Tina asked calmly. Dr. Gores pondered for a moment, and finally looked at the two people, and said solemnly, "Find something to eat." "Yes." Clang. The sound of metal falling to the ground. This was a special shackle that was used to imprison professionals. Luocio rubbed his wrist. The girl in white in front of him was holding a key that could be used to open the shackle. "How do you have the key?" Boss Luo asked curiously. "Analyze. Scan the core structure of the shackle, and you can deduce the size of the key." Araya in white slightly raised his head, and said indifferently, "Then you can create a key with the material structure on the spot." "That's right. Speaking of which, you are the creator of the subworld." Boss Luo rubbed Araya in white's little head. "But if you use this kind of power, aren't you afraid that the chessboard will discover that you have already left the home of elves?" "I encrypted it. This level won't be discovered." Araya shook his head and then said, "Moreover, the will of the chessboard is quite chaotic and low energy." "Low energy?" Boss Luo blinked. Araya tried to express it in a more direct way, similar to mental retardation. It was mental retardation. "I think I know why." Boss Luo smiled and then opened his palm. A stone engraved with ancient oracle bones script appeared on his palm. "Because of this. This is..." Araya in white couldn't help but think. Boss Luo secretly glanced at Araya in white and suddenly said, "I have some similar fragments in my hand, and they were all found in the home of elves under the bed in Mayfair's room, in a box, don't you know?" Araya in white shook her head, and she looked more confused. The two goddesses of creation were her avatars that were projected during the civilization reboot, which was equivalent to half of her. Mayfair was also the reincarnation of Gloria, which was equivalent to a part of her, but she couldn't find any records of this part in her memory. A root authority user, I suspect that my memory has been tampered with. At this moment, Alea in white had reverted to her original emotionless voice. Chapter 1844. A small stone fragment was rotating between Nan Xiaonan's fingers. This was not the original slate fragment she found. It was just something she randomly picked up on the road. Her two fragments had already been handed over to Boss Luo on the way to King City. As for why she picked up such a stone fragment, there was no other reason. It was just to have a substitute. It was easier for her to meditate. In fact, she mainly relied on the visualization method taught by the sealed, big rock in the roaring forest. However, it had been more than 2 days since she came to King City. Aside from sensing the existence of the slate fragment once, there was no other reaction from the visualization method. And after the reaction of the new slate fragment appeared, it soon disappeared mysteriously. Such a big King City, the center of the whole Elness kingdom, the most prosperous city on the continent. Is there only one fragment? She leaned on the table and looked out the window of the luxurious suite of the hotel. The curfew outside was because of the assassin incident. The King's City at night lost its liveliness. There were not many lights on the street. The whole city seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep. After meeting Tang Tianlin in the morning, there had been no news of him until now. He said that he was going to infiltrate the palace through the battle arena, so he didn't know if the assassination this time had any effect on his plans. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. At this time? She shouldn't have called room service. Could it be Tang Tianlin? This was the most likely possibility. Nan Xiaonan quickly stood up, tidied up the loose nightgown on her body, and then opened the door. "You're back so soon. Mr. Lo? I didn't disturb your rest, did I, Lady Nan?" No. Nan Xiaonan, who was tying the belt of her nightgown, suddenly stopped, and then said unexpectedly, "I've taken a shower." No. Nothing, please come in and sit." She hurriedly stepped aside, and made an inviting gesture in a rather reserved manner. "Sorry to disturb you." Then Boss Luo came in. Nan Xiaonan gently closed the door behind him, then took a breath quietly, and then quickly brushed her hair, and then tied the belt. It looked like it was tied, but it was loose. Then, she pulled the neckline open a little. She took a deep breath again, and then showed a faint smile. She seemed to casually walk to Boss Luo's side. How did Mr. Luo know I'm here? Nan Xiaonan slowly sat down beside Boss Luo and crossed her legs. Her clean legs were exposed from the gap under the nightgown. Under the soft light, they were like beautiful jade that had been warm for thousands of years. There was the aroma of alcohol and the smell of cheese. These were all part of the room. Nan Xiaonan knew how to enjoy here, with Tang Tianlin's gold coins. Boss Luo calmly said to the question of the witch of his subworld, "Lady Nan, would you be puzzled by the fact that I can find you?" "Of course not." Nan Xiaonan smiled and immediately said, "What do you want to drink?" "No, I'm not thirsty." Boss Luo shook his head. "And I'm not hungry." Nan Xiaonan suddenly had no conventional topic, so she had to say, "Mr. Luo, you came to me so late, there should be something special, right?" Luoqiu smiled and said, "Lady Nan, are you interested in exploring the palace at night?" "Palace?" Nan Xiaonan couldn't help but startled at this time. She opened her mouth and said, "You mean now?" "I'm afraid it's not a good time. Now the palace's security must be unprecedentedly tight. Besides, you should know that I have almost no ability here." Several scrolls were placed in front of Nan Xiaonan. Boss Luo took them out. "These are some professional scrolls I found on the way." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Lady Nan, see if there are any suitable scrolls." She didn't look at them immediately, but just stared at the man who walked into her room in the middle of the night and said seriously, "Are you serious? I'll wait for you outside." Boss Luo smiled. After leaving these professional scrolls, he pushed the door open and went out, leaving Nan Xiaonan staring at the professional scrolls in a daze. Nan Xiaonan suddenly shook her head, tidied up her collar and looked like a noble lady, and then raised her middle finger toward the door. "You don't know what's good for you." In the alley next to the hotel, when Nan Xiaonan arrived, Boss Luo was tearing some bread and feeding some stray cats here. There was probably a litter of them. She curiously came behind Luoqiu. It was said that such a man was a kind person, but it didn't seem to apply to this Mr. Luo. Probably, for this Mr. Luo, feeding stray cats was not much different from feeding humans. "Are you ready, Lady Nan?" Boss Luo patted the water and stood up. Nan Xiaonan shrugged and said, "The summoner profession is somewhat similar to my previous ability." She stretched out her hand, and a complicated circle suddenly appeared in the palm of her hand, and then a small creature came out. It looked like a kitten, like the stray cats on the ground. "This thing seems to be called Light Spirit," Nan Xiaonan said casually. "It should be good for gathering information. Thank you for giving me this profession change scroll." She returned all the scrolls that she didn't pick. Mr. Luo wouldn't mind, but she couldn't be too greedy. She still understood the rules. "Level?" Boss Luo asked curiously. "After changing classes, there's a 3-level increase." Nan Xiaonan thought for a while and said, "Now I'm a level 5 professional." Boss Luo nodded and took out a bag. He shook it and a pile of items fell out. They were items that emitted an extraordinary glow. Some weapons and some armor. "I've already picked them out. They're all suitable for summoners." Boss Luo kept the bag and said, "There are also some leveling scrolls. Let's level up as we go." "I feel like I'm starting to play the same game as you, Mr. Luo." Nan Xiaonan accepted it without hesitation. "I really like this appellation. Take it as a reward for the 2 fragments Lady Nan gave me," Luoqiu said casually. The light of leveling up began to flicker on Nan Xiaonan's body. She asked, "So, how are we going to sneak into the palace?" "The summoner profession should have a lot of methods." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Please, Lady Nan." Nan Xiaonan blinked her eyes. She knew why the profession change scroll had a summoner system that was similar to her previous ability. "Arrange." The sound of falling and the frightened sobbing of the maids could be heard. Maid Laura had just left for a while when these sounds came from Princess Carol's palace. The maids finally saw Lady Laura. They panicked and crawled in front of her. "Lady Laura, Her Highness! Her Highness!" Her Highness. Even if they were only separated by a screen, they could see the angry figure of the princess. There's nothing else for you to do. You can all leave. The maid slowly ordered. The maids suddenly trembled and rushed out of the door. Laura picked up an ornament from the ground and put it back in its original place. Then she walked behind the screen. Inside the bathtub that was filled with steam, the angry princess of the kingdom was slapping the pool uncontrollably. In the pool, there were several male corpses floating. They seemed to have been played to death. Your Highness, you're tired from playing today. You should rest. At the edge of the bathtub, Laura looked down and said indifferently, You're here. Laura. Every time the princess in the pool moved, her huge and bloated body would create ripples in the water. This isn't fun at all. They're all broken. I want more toys. Find me more toys. Do you hear me? Your Highness. The maid said indifferently, I said, You're tired from playing today. You should rest. Laura. You dare to disobey my orders. The huge body in the pool directly broke out of the water. It was like a ferocious beast that got out of its cage. It quickly rushed towards Laura. The maid easily dodged and then grabbed Princess Carol's wrist and threw her to the ground. The impact caused the edge of the bathtub to crack. You dare to make a move against me. The angry princess' eyes turned red. But soon, Princess Carol's body trembled. She seemed to see the steam turning into the head of a ferocious dragon. The dragon's eyes were staring at her. Her Majesty the Empress ordered me to take care of you. He only heard the head maid say expressionlessly, Take care of your daily life and eat as usual. Your Highness, it's almost time to sleep. Please return to your room, your bed. I'll have someone deliver the toys you want tomorrow. I won't let you go. I won't let you go. The huge body trembled in fear. While it got up, it clamored, it quickly went to its room. Laura, I'll have my mother kill you. Just you wait. The hot steam gradually faded away. Laura slowly sighed. Then, as if she had noticed something, she sharply looked at the back of a stone pillar opposite the bathtub. Her eyes narrowed. With a bang, a pair of huge blood-red wings opened behind her. Do you need me to invite you out? In the faint mist, a slightly short figure slowly walked out. It was actually a noble young master with a lazy smile on his face. The maid tilted her head and said, Who are you? There aren't many people in the king's city who can sneak in without being guarded by several saints. Lady Laura, have you forgotten me so quickly? At this time, the noble young master chuckled and said, Or have I been gone for so long that Lady Laura has forgotten about me? The young man in the mist gradually grew taller, and a mature mustache grew on his face. It's you, Varley. Laura couldn't help but frown. Then she coldly snorted, Her Majesty the Empress has ordered that once you appear, you're to be killed. She directly passed through the bathtub. Her slender arm instantly turned into a dragon's hand, covered with red scales. Still so easily angered, Laura. Mr. Varley, who had regained his appearance as the owner of the castle, faced the dragon's hand that brought a fishy wind. He didn't panic and directly pinched it. Then he gently pulled Laura into his arms. While Laura was panicking, Mr. Varley directly kissed her. This kiss made the angry dragon emissary fall into a daze. After a moment, Laura reacted. Her eyes were filled with anger as she fiercely punched Mr. Varley, sending him to the wall. His entire body was embedded in it. Damn it, you! Laura wiped her lips forcefully. Don't be nervous, Laura. At this time, the adult Mr. Varley came out from the wall and wiped the blood on the corner of his mouth. I just came here to visit an old friend. Besides, you're reluctant to kill me. Otherwise, you wouldn't have just sent me flying, you would have directly pierced my heart. Laura sneered and said, You're thinking too much. I just thought that killing you would be too easy. I'll personally bring you to Her Majesty the Empress and let you receive the punishment you deserve. That would be the best judgment for you. I'll go see her. The adult Mr. Varley smiled and said, But not now, but I promise you, I will definitely go and see her. He slowly walked in front of Laura and reached out to hold her dragon's hand. He lifted it up and gently moved his fingers on the scale-covered dragon's hand. Laura's body lightly trembled, as if she got an electric shock. "I like your hand." Mr. Varley chuckled at this time and said, "Every inch of your skin seems to contain a huge amount of power. It's so fascinating." He looked at Laura's eyes, then with a devilish smile, he bowed his head and kissed the ugly dragon's hand. "Ah!" She suddenly let out a soft moan. Mr. Varley chuckled and directly hugged Laura. Before the bath mist finally dispersed, he disappeared with her in his arms. "Why did you come back?" This wasn't a dragon's hand, it was a woman's almost perfect hand. She ran her finger lightly over Mr. Varley's breast, and at last stopped at his heart. Her fingertips were straight up, but she soon moved them away. "Because of some accidents I didn't expect," Mr. Varley indifferently said, "so I came back early." "You shouldn't have come back," Laura faintly said. "The Empress will definitely kill you. You killed nearly half of the dragons in the continent. She won't let you go, and I won't either. I'm willing to die in your hands." He kissed Laura's forehead and lightly said, "Only you can hold my heart." "I'm not the child who didn't understand anything," she coldly said. "When you said this sentence, I knew." He turned over and stroked the dragon messenger's cheek with his palm and whispered, "You're still the little Laura I knew, the child who hid under the table and stole food." He kissed her passionately. Her body didn't resist, but she symbolically struggled a few times. Amidst the heavy breathing, Mr. Varley's voice suddenly sounded. "Help me do something." What is it?" She crawled forward with difficulty on her stomach. "I want King Amos's key." Can't. Suddenly, more sharp shouts came from outside. It was the guards in the palace. "Assassin!" Chapter 1845. A while ago, the caravan passed through the towering palace walls and then stopped. A large number of palace guards surrounded them at the same time, waiting for Fa. "This is the new chief of the battle arena, the person that Her Highness the Princess wants to see. Quickly step aside." The tall man in the lead coldly snorted. But since the assassination had happened not long ago, the palace was strictly investigating. Even if the person the princess wanted to see was someone disguised as a spy, the loyal palace guards didn't dare to let them pass. At this moment, outside the princess's palace, the noise made sacred swordsman Liulo walk out with an unsightly expression. "Let them pass." At this time, the sword saint stood behind the guards and said expressionlessly, "If anything happens, I will take responsibility." Since the sword saint had spoken, the guards had no choice but to step aside. The guards of the princess palace, riding on their battle beasts, arrogantly walked past the guards. When they arrived in front of sword saint Liulo, the captain of the guards dismounted and gave a greeting. This was the proper etiquette for a saint, not an official exchange. "I've troubled Sir Sword Saint to wait here." The captain smiled faintly, seemingly proud of himself. Sword Saint Liulo faintly said, "Laura told me to wait for you. I've finished my business. You should go in now, don't hinder the patrol. If something happens, I'll be the first to cut you down." Zhao Hai nodded and said, "Liulo, you're the first one I'll kill." The captain's complexion slightly changed. He lowered his head, his eyes were hazy, but he still respectfully complied. Then he quickly climbed onto his battle beast and shouted, "Let's go!" Sword Saint Liulo watched his personal guards pass by indifferently. Among them, there was a rarely seen black-haired, yellow-skinned youth. He was riding on a tall war beast and had a colorful embroidered ball hanging on his body. Although he was not looking sideways, he was secretly sizing up his surroundings. Sword Saint Liulo frowned and suddenly said, "You're the chief of the battle arena? What's your name?" "Tang." The black-haired youth with the embroidered ball on his battle beast indifferently replied, "I've seen Sir Sword Saint." Liulo nodded, then shook his head and said expressionlessly, "There's nothing wrong with wanting to prove one's strength. It's not shameful for a young man to want to succeed in life. But you have to know that some things don't just fall from the sky. I hope you won't regret what you did today. Lord Sword Saint? The captain of the guards couldn't help but frown. At this time, Sword Saintly Yuluo said indifferently, "What's wrong? This old man likes to nag. You, the captain of His Highness' personal guard, also have a problem with that?" "I wouldn't dare." The leader of the guards finally snorted softly, then ordered his men to quicken their pace. The new leader of the battle arena, Tang, nodded at Sword Saintly Yulo. "I believe that when an opportunity comes, we should seize it. No matter if it's a good opportunity or a bad one. If we don't advance, we'll retreat." The guards slowly left. After Sword Saintly Yulo watched them leave, he slowly shook his head and sighed, muttering, "He should have been a good seedling. What a pity." But at this moment, a pillar of fire shot up to the sky from the other side of the royal palace. The fire even reached Princess Carol's palace, where Sword Saint Yuri Luo was. That's the direction Sword Saintly Yulo's gaze suddenly focused. When a human sword saint, a saint realm expert, had a sharp gaze, it was as if countless sharp swords rose up from the surroundings, piercing the guards until they felt a dull pain. At this time, an ear-piercing shout sounded in the palace. "Assassinates dash." Although the palace was huge, with the speed of a human saint, it was only a blink of an eye's distance away. When Sword Saint Liulo arrived, he saw that the guards of the palace were currently encircling a huge, flaming serpent. A group of palace guards had already fallen on the ground. There were burn marks on their bodies, and they were currently wailing and rolling, but it seemed that no real corpses could be seen. At this time, the guards were trying to use dozens of chains to imprison the burning snake, but even with the combined strength of dozens of people, they were still unable to completely suppress the strength of this huge snake. Where did this huge snake come from? It's Lord Sword Saint. Answer me. I don't know. It suddenly popped out from the ground and started spitting fire crazily. Many guards have already been burned. We can't suppress it. What a powerful monster. Get out of the way. Sword Saintly Yulo shouted in a low voice. Knowing that this human sword saint was about to make a move, those guards who were using chains to imprison the burning snake didn't dare to stay any longer. They all released the chains in their hands. Seeing that the huge snake was released, it instantly went berserk and spat out a huge mouthful of flames. "Bastard, how dare you!" Sword Saintly Yulo snorted coldly and cut open the flames with his sword. Just as he was about to make a move again and kill this huge snake, he didn't expect that this huge burning snake actually drilled into the ground. Liulo couldn't help but be startled at this moment. He secretly thought that this bastard was so good at escaping, but at this time, the huge snake had already drilled into the ground and was traveling underground. If he were to make a move again, he would inevitably cause more than half of this palace to collapse. If it was another place, it would be fine. But this was the palace. The human sword saint couldn't help but be a little afraid of attacking the rat for fear of breaking the vases. Just as he was at his wit's end, a guard who was in a sorry state hurriedly flew over. Report. Powerful monsters have appeared in the gardens of the palace, the main hall where His Majesty is discussing matters, and in addition to the Forbidden Army camp where the guards live and the hunting ground. Seeing the bloodstains on the body of the palace guard who came to report, it was obvious that there was a fierce battle. Sword Saintly Yulo frowned at this moment. He instantly jumped up high and indeed felt the aura of several monsters that were not weak. At this moment, there were actually sounds of fierce battle coming from within the palace walls. Who can control so many monsters at the same time? These monsters aren't weak. For them to appear so suddenly, it definitely wasn't set up beforehand. Sword Saintly Yulo frowned at this moment as if he thought of something. Could it be the long-lost summoning profession? Is it that mysterious assassin from this afternoon? Lord Sword Saint, what should we do? Sword Saintly Yulo quickly said, Send more guards to protect His Majesty. I will be able to suppress the monsters in the palace. But the princess's palace. There are still 2 sacred mages there. And a dragon. Don't even think about it. Sword Saintly Yullo snorted coldly. He directly cut open the ground with his sword and dived into the ground as well. Assassin? The study wasn't big, but the collection of books was very rich. Elness's King Amos was currently standing in front of a bookshelf. The book in his hand seemed to be the only one of a kind. Yes, Your Majesty. The guards outside the door said anxiously, Your Majesty, it's dangerous. Please move to a safe place. However, King Amos pushed open the door of the study and looked at the people kneeling outside the door. He said calmly, What is a safe place? If this Elness Kingdom's palace isn't a safe place, where else in the world can protect me? The guards couldn't help but be speechless. At this moment, King Amos waved his hand and said, I'm right here. As he said that, the king closed the door of the study. The palace guards were now drenched in cold sweat. They could only circle around the study to prevent even a fly from flying past. Then, a mosquito landed on the neck of one of the guards. Smack kill. After King Amos returned to the study, he sat in front of the desk without any fear. However, it wasn't that he didn't care. Instead, he was deep in thought. Goo. A shadow moved in the depth of the bookshelf in the study. A low and hoarse voice slowly sounded, King, you called me. King Amos didn't raise his head at this moment. Another assassin came to the palace. What do you think? Is he in cahoots with the guy in the mask? I don't think so. Goo's voice sounded again. Then who could it be? King Amos showed a curious look. After a moment of silence, Goo's voice sounded again. There are many possibilities. You've destroyed many countries. There are many people who want to kill you. In addition, the dragon race also wants to kill you. And those extraterrestrial visitors also want to kill you. Earlier, I sniped 3 extraterrestrial visitors in that secret passage. At this moment, King Amos laughed and said, The only thing left is that the whole world wants to kill me, right? I'll protect you, King. I won't let you die. I'll die sooner or later. At this moment, King Amos shook his head and then smiled. Maybe I'll die of old age, maybe I'll die of illness. Anything is possible. If fate wants me to die, can you save me? Can't you talk nicely? The Yamo's king chuckled, and then said seriously, Speaking of which, who could have caused this disturbance? Why do you think it's just a chaos? Gu asked secretly. King Amos said calmly, If it's not a chaos, then what is it? If it's an assassination, it should be a surprise attack like the masked assassin earlier. Now, the whole palace is in a mess. But here, it's peaceful. Why do you think it is? Maybe it's to create chaos in the palace and distract our attention so that they can strike like thunder. Bad plan. King Amos shook his head. Tell me what you think. Don't take my words for granted. Gu was silent for a moment. Summoner. To be able to enslave so many high-level monsters at once, it might be the Demon Dream Beast Tamer of the Summoner system. Demon Dream. King Amos frowned subconsciously and did not say anything. Gu's voice sounded again. There was once a country whose people could give birth to many bloodlines with the potential to become a summoner. Among them, the royal bloodline of this country was the strongest. Every generation of the royal family would give birth to at least one demon dream. This is the country that you have destroyed, Okadias. I heard that there are still descendants of their royal family alive. King Amos said calmly, I might be too merciful. Gu was silent. King Amos waved his hand and said, Go and help. Although there are many saints in the palace, I think only Li Yulo is willing to run around for me. Don't tire him out. If I leave, what if you die? You can kill me. Even if you are here, I will still die. King Amos said expressionlessly, Go, but don't be gone for too long. For a while, Gu's voice did not sound again. King Amos picked up the unfinished book again, but he was a little absent-minded. Kadia's? Peace between man and nature, could it be that I have awakened the demon dream bloodline? He shook his head, then laughed self-deprecatingly and said to himself, "It seems that there are many people who want to kill me." King Amos seemed to have swept away these annoying things in an instant, and quickly flipped through the book again. Occasionally, he would pick up the teacup and take a sip. What happened outside the window was really outside the window. "Mr. Luo, do you think I've done well?" At this time, Nan Xiaonan was looking at the smoke-filled imperial palace with satisfaction. She felt as if she had returned, as if she had found a little bit of the elegance she had when she roamed the void and traveled through many subworlds. With a wave of her hand, she could make the continent panic. Indeed, it was not the same as before, but it was still better than being able to create some random things outside the chessboard. "Look at these chaotic monsters, how majestic! The effect is not bad." Boss Luo nodded. "Next, I'll have to trouble Lady Nan to maintain this chaos for a little longer." "Don't worry," Nan Xiaonan said proudly, "I'm famous for my endurance. Stamina. I'll go in and take a look." Boss Luo smiled at this time, and then jumped lightly, disappearing into the shadow. "You won't praise me?" Nan Xiaonan shook her head, then licked her lips. Although she knew that the power of this profession was rootless and would disappear after leaving the chessboard world, but it was quite fun. She didn't believe that the chessboard profession's ability could cover her immortal witch ability after leaving. Thus, Nan Xiaonan waved her hand, and a scroll unfurled in front of her. On top of the scroll, there were impressively drawings of many powerful monsters. These were all powerful monsters that were sealed in the scroll. Her ability was to activate the images on the scroll and release the monsters inside. "Oh, let me see which one should be released this time." Nan Xiaonan narrowed her eyes at this time, as if she didn't want to cause too much trouble. "Or, let's release all of them?" "Assassin!" The voice of the guards sounded in this dark room. Laura suddenly stopped and pushed away the adult Mr. Varley behind her, then put on her clothes. She said indifferently, "I need to think about what you said. The palace is in chaos, you should leave quickly. This King Amos is not as simple as you think." Mr. Varley frowned at this time. He felt that this woman was indeed a little different from before. In the past, she would never push him away. "I must get King Amos' key," Mr. Varley said indifferently. At this time, Mr. Varley and Laura frowned almost at the same time, because a brilliant sword light had suddenly blossomed in the middle of the room. In the light, they saw a man with a silver mask at the same time. Chapter 1846. The bright sword light obviously had extraordinary power, but it was aimed at the messenger from the Dragon Clan, the most powerful clan in the continent. Laura was also a sacred realm, and a sacred realm of the Dragon Clan. Facing the attack of the sword light, she was not afraid. Dragon scales were one of the most powerful defenses in the world. The dragon's hand had broken countless swords. But at the moment when Laura was about to grab the sword, Mr. Varley, who had been silent and staring at the silver-masked man, suddenly said, "Don't grab the sword." Seeing that the sword was about to fall into her hand, Mr. Varley's voice sounded. Laura abruptly turned her wrist and grabbed the silver-masked man's arm instead. However, the sword user's reaction was fast. At this time, the sword in his hand directly cut through the scales on Laura's dragon's hand. She was shocked and quickly retreated to Mr. Varley's side. She looked at the wound on her arm in disbelief. The dragon's scales had been broken, and the sword wound had even seeped into her skin. Blood was flowing out along the dense scales. This sword. Laura's eyes changed at this time. She became afraid. "Aurora's Aster," Mr. Varley said indifferently at this time. "It's almost a complete form. I've been here so many times, and I've taken Aurora's Aster 5 times. This is the closest I've seen to the complete form. But you. If you are not a follower, who are you?" The silver-masked man didn't say a word at this time. He just waved the sword. Laura's blood on the sword instantly splashed to the ground. At this time, the blood dripping on the floor instantly eroded the floor. Dragon's blood was poisonous, and the blood of an evil dragon was even more poisonous. Seeing that the other person didn't speak, Mr. Varley didn't mind, but he slowly took a step forward. His intention was quite obvious. "It doesn't matter if you don't speak, I have a way to make you speak," Mr. Varley said indifferently. Then, he stretched out his arm and a big sword made of bones appeared in his hand. From the moment the bone sword appeared, a strong death aura spread out like a gust of wind. The silver-masked man felt the threat of death at this time. There was even a faint vibration from the sword in his hand. This was a confrontation between divine weapons of the same level. It was like the king of the grassland meeting the king of the forest. Just as he felt the threat of the bone sword, the silver-masked man made the first move. He slashed out a huge sword light. Mr. Varley chuckled and blocked with his sword. He easily tore the sword light apart, without the professional power that matches it. Even the sword light of Aurora's Aster is just a facade. If it's only at this level, I won't be interested. The silver-masked man still didn't say anything. He just slashed out a dozen sword lights in an instant. Mr. Varley shook his head. With a sweep, these sword lights were instantly destroyed. But at this time in the dim room, there was no trace of the silver-masked man. "Not good, his target is Her Highness Carol," Laura exclaimed. At this time, she didn't care about her messy clothes as she rushed out of the door. Mr. Varley frowned at first, but he did not chase after her. He muttered to himself, "Princess Caro, the child of King Amos and the Dragon Queen. How brave, your majesty!" Just like that, Mr. Varley hid in the darkness. Laura knew that Varley didn't chase after her. Although she knew that Varley was hiding in order to not expose their relationship, she still felt unhappy. Before long, she had already arrived in front of Princess Caro's palace. She saw 2 Saint Domain masters standing guard in front of the palace. There were also groups of guards around the palace. "Lady Laura, why are you in such a hurry?" The Saint Domain master with a better temper asked with a serious expression. "Is Her Highness all right?" Laura frowned. The Saint Domain master could only say, "Her Highness hasn't woken up since she fell asleep. We've been waiting here. Some disturbances have occurred in the palace, but it didn't affect this place." Laura frowned again. Then she ignored the Saint Domain master and went straight into the palace. When she saw Princess Caro sleeping soundly on the bed and determined that there was nothing wrong with her, the doubts in her heart increased. "Isn't the assassin's target Her Highness?" Laura couldn't help but mutter, but why did he break into Her Highness' palace? She wasn't worried that her relationship with Varley would be discovered. She knew that there weren't many people in the world who knew about Varley's identity. She could count them with one hand. Even if there were rumors outside, it would at most be a scandal about the princess maid having a secret rendezvous with a mysterious expert in the middle of the night. Is this the child of Yamos and the Dragon Queen? At this time, Mr. Varley's voice suddenly sounded in Laura's ear. Her eyes narrowed and she instantly waved the dragon's hand, but it was easily caught. "You've just had a deep conversation and you're already killing me. Sure enough, you've grown up, little Laura." His voice was almost teasing. She stared at the man in front of her who wasn't real. "You're much prettier than your queen when you're angry." Mr. Varley let go of the other person and quickly said, "I was just curious to see Her Highness the Princess. I didn't mean to hurt her. After all, she's the child of your queen. I don't want her to hate me so much that she would endlessly hunt me down. After all, I still need to come here often, so I don't want to have too many troubles in the future. But then again, Her Highness the Princess' appearance is really special. Her Highness doesn't like others to talk about her. If you have something to say, don't say it here." Laura said indifferently. "Does it matter?" Mr. Varley shrugged. "I saw you light up the carefree grass. Even a dragon would sleep for a long time." Laura indifferently said, "Her Highness' spirit is unstable, so this is the only way for her to sleep peacefully." Do you want to go out by yourself, or do you want me to invite you out? I'll leave right away, Mr. Varley said indifferently. No matter what, there are still 2 Saint Masters outside. Sooner or later, they will be aware of my presence. Like I said before, Laura, help me get the key from the Yamos King. If you promise me, I'll take you out of here. Laura sneered. The world is big, I can go wherever I want. Why would I need you to take me out? I'm talking about, Mr. Varley whispered in her ear, the world I live in. I'll take you out of this chessboard-like world. You refused me once before, do you still want to refuse me this time? Laura's eyes slightly changed, but she couldn't stand it anymore. You can hide from 2 Saint Masters and appear in front of me silently. Why don't you take the key yourself? I've already tried. Mr. Varley shook his head and said, King Amos has a loathsome shadow by his side. I can't get too close. Even you. Laura couldn't help but frown. Why, you don't know that there's such a shadow by King Amos' side? Mr. Varley asked thoughtfully. It seems to be there, but it doesn't seem to be there. Laura shook her head. I've felt it several times, but I couldn't find any trace of it. I haven't been able to confirm it. Mr. Varley said, I can feel the power of a divine weapon from that shadow. Is it one of the 3 divine weapons of the Elness Kingdom, the 10-directional heavenly punishment? Probably, Mr. Varley said indifferently. If I get hit by that thing, I'm afraid it won't feel good. So, about the key. I'll come back. After saying that, Mr. Varley quickly hid in the shadows. Laura frowned. At this time, a maid timidly bowed her head and said with a trembling voice, Lady Laura, the saint outside sent me to ask if anything happened to Her Highness. No, you can go. Laura waved her hand. Her Highness is sleeping very soundly, tell them not to worry. Yes, seeing that the maid had left, Laura slowly sighed. She went to Princess Carol's side and sat down. She silently looked at Wally. Wally didn't appear again. Obviously, he had really left this time. At least, he wasn't in Princess Carol's palace. I can't hide this matter. Suddenly, Laura stood up and clenched her teeth. With a wave of her hand, a rhombus-shaped crystal appeared in her palm. She clenched the crystal and closed her eyes. After a while, a low female voice sounded in Laura's ears. Laura, what's the matter? Is Carol disobedient again? Your Majesty, there's something I must tell you. Speak. Varley has appeared. Finally, the blood feud of the hundreds of dragons, bang. The crystal suddenly exploded in Laura's palm, shattering into dust. Her lips trembled and she sat down weakly. She whispered, Her Majesty the Empress is about to descend to Elness, Imperial Palace. King Amos's study. At this time, the guards were nervously looking around. But soon, a faint fragrance drifted in the air. They suddenly felt sleepy and fell down one by one without warning. At the same time, a figure quickly walked to the door of the study. He was a man with a silver mask and a sword in his hand. He broke the door open. The moment the door was broken open, the man shouted in a low voice, King Amos, your time to die has come. A strong wind accompanied the man's voice into the study. In front of the desk, King Amos's hair was blown by the wind. Facing the fierce, killing intent of the man with the silver mask, King Amos put down the book in his hand. Do you have any other lines? The man with the silver mask sneered. Without saying anything, he stabbed with his sword. The sword emitted a bright light at the tip of the sword. King Amos's eyes narrowed. He suddenly pulled out a gorgeous longsword hanging on the wall behind him and directly slashed at the assassin's sword. The gorgeous longsword instantly broke when it hit the sword. However, the heavy force made the assassin's entire arm numb. The sword fell out of his hand and fell to the ground. The assassin was shocked and instinctively reached out to grab the sword that fell to the ground. At this time, King Amos threw the broken sword in his hand, which hit the sword and sent it flying. The incomparably sharp sword easily pierced into the wall after being sent flying. At this time, King Amos said coldly, Is this how Li Yulo taught you to use the sword? The man with the silver mask suddenly stopped breathing. Then he sneered, If there is a chance, I will fight with the sword saint and learn from him. You have a fast reaction. King Amos nodded. Under the assassin's gaze, he slowly returned to the chair and sat down again. He said indifferently, If you don't want to admit it, then leave. Come back next time when you are ready. His arm was still numb. Although King Amos' sword was broken, its power, he was silent for a moment. He glanced at the sword that was inserted into the wall behind King Amos. He gritted his teeth and said, Are you really going to let me go? King Amos acted as if he didn't hear him. He picked up the book and even turned his body sideways. The assassin's gaze was fixed on him, but he retreated step by step. Finally, he reached the entrance. He secretly wondered if King Amos was really going to let him go. But at this time, King Amos suddenly muttered to himself. In the evening, the guards found the mask and weapon of the assassin who entered the palace during the day from Locke's weapon shop. But the next day, the same assassin appeared again with the same sword. What a coincidence! Of course, there are many coincidences in the world. It's not strange. The assassin's gaze suddenly shrank. His whole body turned cold. You know. He looked at King Amos with a trace of fear in his eyes. He suddenly took a deep breath and rushed out of the door. King Amos raised his head and looked. He shook his head. You didn't even close the door. You're still too young. But King Amos's calm face suddenly showed a trace of surprise, because, at this moment, a figure quietly walked out of the open door of the study room. At the intersection of the moonlight and the lantern light, the newcomer slowly walked in. Boss Luo. The astonished look on the Yamos king's face quickly disappeared, and he casually said, It seems that I'm not good enough as a guard of the palace. Have I reached the point where anyone can enter and leave freely at any time? I just got lucky. After all, someone made the guards fall asleep in front of me. Boss Luo smiled at this moment. Besides, I'm just here to retrieve something. Your Majesty. What is it? King Amos asked with interest. The sword on the wall behind Your Majesty. Boss Luo said indifferently and waved his hand. The sword on the wall trembled and was about to fly out of the wall. At this moment, a glint flashed in the Yamos king's eyes as he suddenly reached out and grabbed the hilt of the sword. He then let out a soft shout as his body sank, and his feet instantly cracked the floor beneath him. However, he couldn't hold the sword firmly. In the end, it flew out of King Amos's hand and fell into Luocchio's. Chapter 1847. The new champion of the Colosseum was temporarily arranged to stay in a quiet room in Princess Carol's palace due to the chaos in the palace. Ever since he was arranged to stay in this room, Tang Tianlin didn't see any of the guards, not even the palace guards. It was as if he had been forgotten. He could only hear some noises coming from outside from time to time. It seemed that at night, the palace of the Kingdom of Elnis was once again invaded by assassins. Tang Tianlin couldn't help but feel a little strange that there were 2 assassinations in one day. Tang Tianlin couldn't help but think of the Yamos king, who had almost conquered the world, in the modern world outside the chessboard. There was a certain emperor in the history of ancient countries who had also unified the world. He was often the target of assassination attempts, and his palace was also heavily guarded at all times. A king who could destroy so many countries was definitely not a mediocre person. Was King Amos of Elnis really willing to live as the Dragon Queen's gigolo? Staying here forever is not a solution. He needed to find a way to investigate the situation in the palace, whether it was Princess Carol or King Amos. Tang Tianlin pulled off the embroidered ball on his body. He quietly opened the window of the room, only to find that there were 2 bodyguards standing outside the window. They were even standing guard facing the window. What do you want? The guard asked coldly. I just want to get some fresh air. Tang Tianlin shrugged and said indifferently, Also, can you get me something to eat? I haven't eaten for a day. The guard responded by ignoring Tang Tianlin's words and closing the window from the outside with a cold and emotionless face. Tang Tianlin couldn't help but shake his head. He took 2 steps back, and then his body began to gradually fade. The opacity instantly decreased by about 50%. Tang Tianlin waved his hand toward the cabinet beside him. His palm easily went through the cabinet. This was a special ability that came with his profession. It was very convenient. According to the skill's introduction, this skill was called universal penetration. It could penetrate more than 95% of objects without any biological characteristic. However, Tang Tianlin preferred to call this skill ghostly wall. He was about to go through the wall. However, at this moment, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded in his ears. "If I were you, I wouldn't be so reckless. This is the palace guarded by several saints, not a garden outside. Such a move would be seen as a provocation. Especially you, the palace of Princess Carol, which is the most heavily guarded palace in the country." Tang Tianlin's eyes instantly froze. He looked around nervously, but he couldn't find the source of the voice. "Who are you?" Tang Tianlin was still looking around as he slowly turned his body. "Sacred? Perhaps you're one of the sacred experts in the palace? Sword Saint or one of the other 2 Saint Masters? You want to know who I am?" The voice sounded again. Tang Tianlin had calmed down by now. He said calmly, "You suddenly spoke. Didn't you want to attract my attention? Now that I know of your existence, are you not going to say anything? Go to the bed next door, then move the floor under the bed. There is a passage. You can come down through the passage." The mysterious voice suddenly became gloomy. "Of course, I can't guarantee what will happen to you. Perhaps curiosity will bring something more terrible than death." Tang Tianlin shrugged and walked to the side of the bed. It was impossible for him to crawl under the bed. He directly activated the Everything Piercer skill and jump. His body went through without any accident and fell to the ground. Then, he disappeared. He only felt his body sliding in an extremely slanted tunnel. After a long time, he finally stopped. In front of him was a dark hole. It was not big, about the size of the room he was in, but on the mud floor, he could see the bones of some small reptiles. At the same time, Tang Tianlin saw another person. One was sitting against the wall. His hair was disheveled, and he couldn't even see his face clearly. He could only vaguely see his extremely withered cheek. His legs were motionless, and his hands were hanging by his side. He looked as thin as a skeleton. The moment he saw the other person, he even had half of the corpse of an unknown insect in his mouth. "Your limbs are broken?" Tang Tianlin couldn't help but be shocked. He said subconsciously, You have been trapped in this place all this time? Who are you?" "I want to lie flat on my back." The voice sounded again, but Tang Tianlin clearly didn't see the other person's lips moving. It wasn't even ventriloquism. "In addition to my limbs, my spine is also broken. I have been leaning like this for many years. Can you help me lie flat on my back, little friend?" Tang Tianlin nodded and cautiously approached the mysterious old man's side. He directly reached out to touch the other person's arm and found that the other person's arm was indeed more withered and shriveled. He moved the old man little by little and found that the old man's back clothes had long been rotten. There was even a part of his skin and flesh that was tightly stuck to the wall. Just by moving the old man, the skin and flesh that were stuck to the wall had been directly torn apart. A shocking wound appeared. This should have been an extremely painful thing. However, Tang Tianlin heard the old man's laughter. He still didn't speak. His voice sounded from all directions, but it was transmitted back and forth in the narrow space. Gradually, it became terrifying. "So comfortable. I haven't lied like this for a long time. So comfortable. Ha ha ha. Say, Senior, how long have you been here?" Tang Tianlin couldn't help but frown. "Senior?" The old man's laughter suddenly stopped. "Let me ask you, how old are you this year?" 30. Tang Tianlin casually said a number, which was a little younger than his original age. I'm only 26 years old now, but you call me senior? What, you? Tang Tianlin was shocked. This person looked like he was on the verge of death. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was like a dying old man. How did you become like this? How did I become like this? How did I become like this? The old man, or the extremely withered old man's voice suddenly became excited. I'll tell you everything, my experience. But before that, you have to promise to do one thing for me. Of course, I'll also give you unexpected benefits. Tang Tianlin couldn't help but frown. Obviously, he didn't want to agree, so as not to complicate matters. But unexpectedly, he received a prompt from the will of the chessboard. Brave adventurer, are you willing to listen to the past of this mysterious man with a miserable life? You might trigger a miracle. Or it may just be a trap. If you don't want to trigger it, just kill this mysterious man with a miserable life. I won't blame you. This is just a guy with a miserable life. Miserable life? 3 times? Tang Tianlin couldn't help but open his mouth. Was the will of the chessboard always so naughty? You tell me first. Tang Tianlin sighed and said, I'll see. If I can help, I'll do it, but I won't guarantee anything. The old man, the guy with a miserable life, suddenly became silent. His limbs were crippled, and even his spine was broken. Lying on the ground, he was no different from a dead man. Tang Tianlin's patience was surprisingly good at this moment. He stayed quietly with the old man. Finally, the voice sounded again. My name is Norma. 2 years ago, I came to the King's City and became the champion of the most famous arena in the King's City. I was summoned by the princess of the palace. I thought this would be the turning point of my life. My life would become different, and a new legend would be born. But I didn't expect that this was actually the beginning of a nightmare, he said faintly. Tang Tianlin's brows gradually tightened. He didn't know what was going on outside the palace at this time, and he didn't know if the guards outside had discovered him after he disappeared from the room. Palace, King Amos study. You've received the great holy light sword that has been unsealed for the 2nd time. Now it's the incomplete 3rd divine weapon, Aurora's Aster. The moment the sword was in his hand, Boss Luo directly received a prompt from a chessboard. After losing the weapon for 2 days, it seemed to have been upgraded. Was it because of Mr. Max from Locke's Arms shop? One of the 3 incomplete divine weapons, which meant that Aurora's Aster was not in its complete state. Boss Luo looked at the exposed divine weapon and chose to hide the special effects on it without hesitation. Soon, it became an ordinary longsword again. King Amos had calmed down from the moment of shock. He was a king who had almost conquered the world. So far in his life, there were probably very few things that could make him lose his composure like this. Now it seems that it's really no different from an ordinary sword, King Amos said calmly, just like the fake goods sold on the streets outside. It's quite good like this. Boss Luo smiled slowly and said, Your Majesty, don't you think that, if it's a weapon for assassination, it's more convenient to have such an ordinary appearance? King Amos opened his mouth and then chuckled. He shook his head and did not rush to speak. Instead, he pulled out a handkerchief from the drawer and slowly wiped the wound on his palm. When he finished wiping the wound, King Amos threw the stained handkerchief aside. He then looked up and said, You said this sword is yours. So, you're the one who lost your weapon in Locke's Arms shop and got involved in Max's murder case? Your Majesty seems to be very clear about everything. Boss Luo blinked at this moment. Not only do I know that you lost your weapon at the weapons shop, but I also know that you bought a fake one from a stall near the murder scene. King Amos smiled calmly and said, As a king, I should know everything. But as a king, I won't say anything. Even if I know, I just know. When I want to say it, I'll say it. Luocha waved his hand and the incomplete celestial weapon was instantly kept. Is this the right time to say it? King Amos said calmly. My spies can't find out your origin. They have the ability to investigate the origins of everyone in this world. At most, it's not a matter of time. Only you, they can't find any trace of you. It's as if you appeared out of thin air. I've met such people before. There are even records of them in some of the royal family's secret collections. As he said this, he looked at Boss Luo and said expressionlessly, We call them outsiders, invaders. No matter how many invaders come and how many times they come, they only have one goal in mind. Boss Luo also said frankly, Your Majesty, our team is currently facing a problem. We need to summon the kingdom's guardian. But from the current situation, it's not easy. I'm not sure if Your Majesty has any good solutions. King Amos narrowed his eyes and said, In the past, there were many members of the royal family. The King of Kings didn't care about sacrificing 1 or 2 princes and princesses to stop the disaster brought by the invaders. But now, there are only 2 members of the royal family of Elnis, including me, the king. Tell me, how do you want me to help you? The person who presides over the summoning ceremony must be me, the king. The only one who can be sacrificed is the princess of this country. She's my only bloodline. Do you want me to kill my own bloodline with my own hands? Then I have no other questions. Boss Luo nodded and said, Sorry for disturbing you tonight. After saying this, Boss Luo was about to leave. King Amos probably didn't expect this result and was at a loss. This invader seemed to be different from the invaders recorded by the royal family. But looking at the back of the invader who was about to leave, King Amos opened his mouth but didn't say anything in the end. Suddenly, the Yamos king's brows instantly furrowed. He sensed an aura that was all too familiar to him. It was the woman who had appeared with him in the legends that had spread across the entire continent. The princess of the dragon race. The current queen of the dragon race. Yamos, are you going to let the invader who tried to hurt my daughter go? An angry voice sounded in the sky above the royal palace. A huge vortex appeared in the sky above the royal palace. In the vortex, a huge figure appeared like a falling meteorite. Looking at the spectacle of dark clouds and the huge figure of the queen of the dragon race, Boss Luo couldn't help but blink in the courtyard outside the study room. It seems the progress is faster. He shook his head. Some words shouldn't be said casually. Otherwise, he would be regarded as an annoying client. Previously, he complained that it was too slow, but now, he complained that it was too fast. Rip. Something like that.